Hey there, I'm Eternal, and I'm an object show fan that has barely watched any object shows. We have to fix that. Let's play Object Catchup. Hello and welcome into Object Catchup, the series we discuss object show episodes right after watching them. Whether they're new or old, famous or unknown, it doesn't matter. We will get to it all. Now, today's main topic is going to be web, alright? Which is the series created by finnydalmos, which had an episode released a bit over a week ago. However, before we get to cover that, and I'll introduce it more properly later, we have an episode of BFDIE to get to, yes, because the weekly episode of BFDIE released yesterday. It is a rejoin episode, which I did not expect, but there is actually a rejoin episode. The Exploding Loser Chamber is what it is titled. It is 10 minutes, which I believe stands out as the longest BFDIE episode. Let's see, I've heard some commotion about it, so let's talk about it. Let's do all that jazz, and then afterwards we can go into web. Let's go. BFDIE time. Okay, so that is a BFDIE 6, the Exploding Loser Chamber. So indeed, it is a rejoin episode, which is rather interesting because I had originally theorized, right, that I like the idea of that double elim in episode 5 because that would mark the halfway point of the season. Right? It'll be the one double elim, and then it does single elim, and then it ends at episode 10. Which, you know, it feels like that would be very correct, right? However, this theoretically increases the current episode count by 1, right? So that means that theoretically with this double elim, even though like it doesn't increase the number of contestants, so it doesn't go up by 2 episodes, it goes up by 1 episode. Because we remained at the same number of contestants, right? We just got rid of 1 and replaced 1, right? So that is like, it's interesting, right? However, it ends up like, it probably doesn't matter. You know, if it has 11 episodes or 10 episodes, maybe there'll just be another double elim like next episode. Who knows? But either way, we end up having the beginning with a sticker which trolls Ruler by drawing on the ground a heart of them and Jammy. So there we go. Sticker, one of the first BFDI characters in history to be a shipper. Good job. Good stuff there. Ruler, I don't think Ruler's happy about this. Ruler does not probably give a damn. We have the image of Jammy, but like, cause Ruler has to look down at Jammy. But anyway, Jammy's back because everybody's back because the tinier loser chamber exploded, which is nice. So we end up having a rejoin happen here, and it seems like the idea is that they get split off into duos, alright? There's one chest, and you're split off into duos. So how does it work? Basically, we end up having the situation with the chest is that basically the person who, the team that wins the chest has their eliminated contestant join, and their non-eliminated contestant, and they're currently in the game contestant eliminated, which means that the eliminated contestant wants the chest and the non-eliminated contestant does not want the chest, but they're together, right? Which means that if one does the other, like one is against the goals of the other, so you're more like while your teammates, your team enemies, basically, which is something. But either way, we end up having the teams which end up forming Hot Dog and Toothpaste and Jammy first. It's Fern and Hot Dog first. Okay, yeah, kind of the team of the more hasn't had too much characters. Toothpaste and Jammy, formerly enemies, but now not enemies anymore because Toothpaste's enemy is Needy. Speaking of which, Rose and Needy, apparently Rose doesn't get to say anything in this episode because in protest of her getting eliminated, Rose is doing a protest and a vow of silence. So Rose doesn't get to speak the entire episode. Now, okay, that is interesting. Of course, I saw that the immediate theory is like, yo, did we just not book gooseworx for another episode? Because I mean, like, of course, we end up having the celebrity casting, quote unquote, of a bunch of the characters here. So gooseworx, creator of the Amazing Digital Circus, most popular in the animation show, and then also Tom Skerritt, which is rather a popular creator over there as the voice actor of Ruler. So then, as soon as you hear this, you're like, okay, did we just have gooseworx? Not like, did gooseworx just not get in the booth? What happened? Right? I don't believe that's the case, because BFDIE, like, the reason why they get to do the celebrity casting is because in BFDIE, it's all pre-made. Like, this show is already made, right? Which means that, like, we end up having the possibility of bringing them on, because you just have to do one session and they just do the entire show. Like, at the end of the day, it's not that many lines, right? Like, your average character in a Teapot episode probably has more lines than a character does in BFDIE, or at least it's similar, right? So, like, in general, it makes sense. It's possible that, of course, one of those things where it's like, maybe this episode wasn't planned, or they did the lines, and gooseworx couldn't record pickups and all that stuff, but I don't believe any of that. I think it's just a writing decision. It's a bit of an odd one, because I don't think Rose doing this vow of silence makes a lot of sense, to be honest. Rose felt like it was kind of a little bit more than needy time. They didn't care that much. Like, they were competing, but they didn't care that much, right? So, seeing them do such a violent protest against the show, I feel like it's not quite right. However, look, the writers can do what the writers do. It's BFDIE, right? Like, things don't make sense anyways. So, yeah, and then there's also Ruler and Money, which ends up acting as a new henchman. To be fair, Money's pretty susceptible to listening, so yeah, Ruler might be able to pull that one off. Sidewalkie and David. Sidewalkie is not too happy about this, and then Beach Ball and Sticker, which is interesting. So, we have 10 minutes around the chest. That's already the challenge, and then we get to begin. So, a bunch of various tactics. So Beach Ball was stuck in the recovery center because of its positioning back when it originally back in China was being explained. So Sticker tries lying to Beach Ball as part of the whole cheating thing, going like, yay, if we both don't get the chest, we will win, both of us. Which, I mean, of course that helps out Sticker, but not Beach Ball. And then Beach Ball believes it, because Beach Ball and Sticker, they're massive friends, and Sticker would never say anything wrong to Beach Ball ever, So, yeah, that's their game plan. In the meantime, Jammy and Toothpaste end up going over there, but we end up having, well, here's the deal. Jammy wants to join, so they grab the chest, and they're just kind of running with it constantly. But Toothpaste is like, well, here's the deal. I need this to go to Needy, because I want Needy to get eliminated, right? Okay, so that's fair. So then they end up chasing each other in a wild goose chase, because Jammy wants it and Toothpaste wants it. So they're doing that tactic. In the meantime, Ruler and Money, and they're going hiding in a bush, which, by the way, this is the coolest hiding in a bush ever. No show has ever done hiding in a bush better than this. Look at this, fucking night vision. But Ruler comes in with a game plan. We don't do anything until 2 minutes left, where you're gonna go you're gonna go get the chest, and then bring it, and then attack Toothpaste at the last minute, give them the chest, and then they get out because Toothpaste annoyed Ruler in the last episode, right? So Money decides to agree with this plan, with the concept that, okay, I might be a henchman, it might not be nice or anything, however, as part of the plan, I have to get the chest, right? So if I just get the chest and then dip off, right? Like, if I just get the chest and keep it, then that means that I get to keep the chest. Then I get to be in. So Money ends up coming in with that plan, a counter plan to Ruler's plan. In the meantime, Sidewalkie and David don't do anything. David actually doesn't move, which is really interesting. Another theory that people had, again, that was that David was going to win and the prize was going to be to join BFDI. Nope. David could not have cared less about this. They actually don't do anything. And Sadako, who, I mean, of course doesn't mind, so it goes like, wow, you are really weird. Why don't you care? So that's interesting. And then in the meantime, there's also the team of Needy and Rose. Rose takes the vow of silence, however, ends up holding the chest for a little bit. And Needy is like realizing that, well, if I don't do anything, then no other team has an incentive to get the chest, right? Because then the only person that has the incentive for Rose to not have the chest is Needy, right? Which means that Needy actually has to run off and go chase after Rose, which means that they have to try. And now Needy's trying, right? Which makes him feel alive, right? Like, oh my god, I'm caring, which is interesting. Character development, right? So now I'm 100% sure, but what is going to happen is in BFDIE 7, Needy's going to be like, I enjoyed trying, I'm going to try that some more, and they're immediately getting eliminated. This has to happen. This is the most BFDIE thing ever. But yeah, it turns out that at the end of all of these strategies and strategical equations, it turns out that, well, actually, by the way, eventually, Beach Ball ends up getting informed about the challenge. They end up getting mad at Sticker, but either way, by then, the ball was already lost. No, the chest was already lost by literally everybody, because we ended up just having Money hide. Like they murder Ruler, and then they end up, because they end up murdering Ruler, snapping Ruler in half, and then eventually they hide in the bush. They just get to chill with the chest until they eventually drop by. So good job, Money. If you have rejoined the game, you get to see more of Michael Huang's new voice. It's a relative. Again, I like Money's voice. It's kind of different. I remember I gave a really good comparison for what it sounds like. However, I don't remember. Dude, that was like a great. I did a great comparison, but I don't. It was like a. Dude, I don't remember. I remember I said that it was like a anxious, higher-pitched book or something. Is that what it said? No, I didn't say that. I don't know what I said. I said something smart. Anyways, yeah, so Money's back in the game, but, and that means that Ruler is eliminated. It's a bit unfortunate. I really would have liked to see Ruler try to fly solo. However, this was just another challenge with a henchman and they're getting eliminated after Jammy gets eliminated. I would have rather somebody like Sidewalky maybe get eliminated. Not too sure. Oh yeah, I forgot. What happened to Fern in this episode? Fern ends up just kind of working out, apparently being like, I'm strong, and it turns out that they're not actually strong at all. They worked out for 4 minutes. But yeah, good job, Fern, on weightlifting. Yeah, that was a fun scene. Fern has been very much so side character, right? I feel like Fern hasn't done a main plot in an episode, which is interesting. I'm still absolutely this doesn't change. I believe that Sticker is massive winner vibes. You know, Sticker's the perfect character to win. However, maybe like Sticker going to a finale would need to be with a less extreme contestant. So like, I think Sticker to win would need to go in a finale like Fern or something, right? And in the meantime, I'm probably okay. Do you want to hear my elimination order? Needy next episode, then okay, Needy, Toothpaste, Sidewalk. No. Bunny. Hold on. Needy, Toothpaste, Money, Sidewalky, Fern, and then Sticker wins. That is my elimination order prediction. All right. I don't know if I'm wrong, but yeah. And either way, the vote for your favorite contestant is still relevant. By the way, however, it's still relevant. However, the eliminated contestant don't have a voting code anymore. Ooh. Oh. Yo, what's going on with that? Wait a minute. Oh yeah, the eliminated contestant don't have a code anymore. Wait, what? Yo, that's kind of weird though. Yo, what's happening? Wait a minute. Huh? You can't. Whoa. I don't know. Okay, my prediction is that maybe it's I'm sorry. I'm trying. What could this be? Because you can't vote for the eliminated contestants anymore, so that means that they're not needed. Those votes are not required anymore. So maybe like the only way these could be important is because like the idea for what's it is that like this could be like a very unorthodox way to do a winner vote, right? Where it's like eventually out of the final two who got historically the most vote for your favorites wins or whatever, right? And then they made a variant for each one. Like that would have been a theory, but I don't know. I really don't know. But either way, Sticker's gonna win. Let's go over into the show that we're actually supposed to watch today. But BFDI doing good. Good job. I liked it. But get gooseworx to actually voice that next time. What are you doing? Okay, let's go. Alright, well, the show that is actually the piece of today is finnydalmos' mainline show. So, a couple months ago, we took a look at BFPR, which was a different little concept that was made by finnydalmos. However, finnydalmos is actually mainly creating a series titled Web, or Walk Cycle's Epic Blender, which you would think would not stand for Web, it would stand for WCEB. However, I don't know. I guess we'll find because, you know, it just happens. We're going to need to jump into it. The first episode, majority of those are released like 2 to 1 year ago, but we're starting off with an episode released, let me find the date, on March 2023. It is titled Web 1, Blenderphobia. Here we go. Okay, so that is episode 1 of Web. Okay, so this is really interesting, alright? Because I was thinking about this and I was like, yo, it's crazy how I've never seen this. Because this asks a question which I'm surprised no show has ever tried to do, right? The question that this show asks, and that ends up being very much of the identity of this, is that like, hey, what if a large cast object show had a small cast? that is the extent of this. It's doing all of the beats of a large cast object show. However, it has like it has 10 characters, right? Like it's really interesting, and that makes for an absolutely minuscule episode indeed. Because like yeah, you know, if you think about it, right, you're usually in a large cast episode 1, have introducing everyone by showing them the random activities. Then after everybody's been shown off, the host drops by, they form teams, challenges introduced, and then the teams are saved, right? And that tends to take like 30 minutes, right? Because it takes like, I don't know, 10 minutes to do it. But like here, it takes about 1 minute to do each thing, because it only has to introduce 10 people instead of 60, right? Like, you see what I mean? Like, that's why this episode ends up being super fast. I mean, I'm presuming, okay, my guess, right, is that this show is not going along this route for very long, because it is going to get significantly longer, right? Like, these episodes are getting longer and longer. So it's not following this for very long, but it seems like it's going to follow it. Let's quickly run down. Oleg ends up being the host of the show. I believe by the name of the show, they're called Walk Cycle, maybe? And they're doing a prize for a blender, which nobody really likes, but I mean, like, they have to do it anyways, right? So, yeah, and we have here our contestant. We have a coffee pot who's very logical, but also dislikes their peers. A burned steak, who doesn't care about anything at all. A plug who's kind of relatively sociable, you know, has that like kind of bell energy to it. We've got Shirt, who's just very happy. Shirt, who's very outgoing, you know, very easy into ideas. We have a Spider, who the other people don't like for some reason. I get the spider phobic, but they end up, you know, they're relatively hanging out. Well, the microphone that everybody considers is annoying. Candy, who's the more ragey one. Container that doesn't speak and is also super like heavy. Then Spring, that's like the everything's okay character, right? And then we end up having this like sheet of paper that I don't. What are you? You're like a sheet of metal, but you know that's the character that does the least. But either way, we end up having them do the competition for an epic blender, or it's just a blender. Okay, and then I'm doing the challenges to get top of the rock. The fellas from Team 2, I guess is what they're called, ends up... Actually, wait, do I have the teams on there? I kind of have the teams on there. Okay, so from Team 2, which ends up being comprised of the plug, the candy, the shirt, the sheet of whatever, and then container. We end up using the plug to climb up there, and it's very fast in the wind, but they don't ever get container up there because container is too heavy, right? So they don't manage to actually get on the cord. In the meantime, the other team, that's Coffee Pot, Coffee Pot, Mike, the Steak, the Spider, and somebody ends up, and the Spring. Those eventually, thanks to the capability of the Spider to climb up walls, they're the Spider yogurt, I'm calling them Spider, but, they're a yogurt. But, like, they end up winning the challenge. Who should get eliminated here? It should be Container. At the end of the day, because here's the deal. Yes, okay, Container couldn't get up using the tactic of the plug. However, the thing about it is that there's not an attempt here from Container, right? Container doesn't, because everybody says hop on, and Container, it's not like Container tries to hop on and fails. It's just that Container hears the command and stays put, right? They could at least go over there, do something, right? Do literally anything, but they don't do anything. That means that they just end up sitting there, and, like, you could argue that, they can't get up, maybe, but it's one of those things where I'd presume that, yeah, other people pushing might be difficult, but you can pull your own weight, right? Because how are you standing in the first place? So I don't really know. And also, not, like, this is just going to be the gag, right? So there's non-speaking text that doesn't move, doesn't talk, and is just there, right? So I don't believe it to be useful. I would say that Container should go. It is about safe, so they might clutch out, but we're going to need to see. Okay, that was episode 1 of Web. It's interesting. I'm curious for how long it keeps this up, because I don't think it can keep this up for very long. Like, again, like, without making the episodes, like, the episodes will not be longer if it remains on this cycle, right? So I don't know. Episode 2 of Web is titled Gravity's Back On. All right, let's go. Okay, so that is web number 2. Okay, I'm not gonna lie. I think misunderstanding Cole's asset, alright, to be burnt steak might be one of my funniest misunderstandings in a while. What? Burnt steak. I'm looking at it now. I was like, it's not. Well, you can. I mean, like, you can see it, right? Like, there's like the shape, right? Cause where it's like it's rounder at the bottom, and there's like a line in the middle, kind of how the steak usually, has the line, right? And then if he'd be burned, it'd be blackened, right? So I mean, like, you see you get it, right? Like, you see what I mean, right? Surely, right? But yeah, that is interesting. We're gonna having a couple of bleachers added on apparently for episode 2. By the way, this first interaction between Pot and Cole is actually very cool. I actually liked it a lot. But we end up having ourselves the elimination. We're actually getting kind of dead wrong. I said Container's going to get eliminated. The Container actually gets the most votes at 5. However, I believe that it's this copium incoming, but I don't think that the scale is large enough here to really make it. I still think I'd be right. Basically, in my opinion, is because here's the deal. I think that how vote to save tends to play out, right, is that vote to save results really do depend, right? Because when you have a vote to save, right, without many voters, right? I mean, I don't even know how many voters there were, but there's like 12 or something, right? It's like 14, whatever. But, like, without that many, it makes the least notable character, right? Like, the character that you would think would get voted by the least amount of people, to get out, right? Because, like, there's not that much margin. However, the deal is that as the numbers scale upwards, right, then that stops being the case. Because the character that you think is the most irrelevant isn't going to be the same as for a lot of people, right? So that means that I think with more votes, it ended up skewing down to just generally a bit more unlikable stuff. So I think Container will get out. But I think in this case, there aren't enough votes. So I think Container, by being, I guess, a standout in the sense where they were relevant in the episode, and also I guess a relatively unique character idea, ends up surviving for that reason. All right, so that I believe is what I'd explain, is how I'd explain this situation. But either way, we end up having the eliminated contestant being a numbered in T-shirt who gets eliminated 1 vote. As I said, I mean, it's not exactly fair because they're not really the one. However, either way, I mean, like, it's fair enough in the sense that T-shirt wasn't really a character that I would ever be voting for. Like, they were interesting, but they weren't, like, they didn't seal the deal here. So, yeah, and the elimination pencil ends up doing its job, and we end up having an erasure of T-shirt as a contestant. So yeah, they did get eliminated, which presumably means that they've been erased. They're not there anymore. They died. So yeah, and we have the challenge, which is a running race. Yes, it gets from the start to the finish. You get to nominate one person on each team. Will get to compete in this challenge. The other ones won't. So, yeah, I'm having Plug going for the team because they can fly and they'll get there pretty easily. And in the meantime, the other team ends up nominating Mike, because who knows? Because I mean, like, who knows who the hell's going on that team? So yeah, until eventually, Mike wasn't going anyways, but Plug eventually decides to protest against the challenge by saying, "Look, we aren't going. You're literally a god capable of destroying and creating life, and yet the challenge you come up is a running race." Okay, I mean, like, well, first of all, is this running race a bad challenge? Yes, but not for the reason that they're pointing out. The reason why this running race isn't a very good challenge is because one person from each team has to do it, right? And while there is, like, a degree of like, strategy that you can put into it, it's like, oh, who should do this, right? It is much better if it is like everybody does a different thing, right? Like, for example, I don't know, if you had to get one person in a running race, one person in a boxing match, right, and then one person in a freaking long jump competition, right? Like, you could at least have the team strategically, but then everybody still gets to do it. Having a challenge where having a challenge where 90% of the people don't do anything because they weren't nominated isn't good, right? So that's the reason why the challenge is bad. The fact that it's just a running race is okay, right? Because, I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's kind of complaining for no reason, because it's like, I'm sorry, you're complaining that the challenge of the running race isn't very hard. What challenge do you want? You want it to be a harder challenge? Like, you want to lose rather than the other, you know? Like, what's the point? You're trying to make, like, yes, I understand the host is a god capable of doing anything. You're not. So he has to make the challenge suitable for you. What do you want him to do? This is an unreasonable protest. But then we end up having Wall Cycle eventually go like, okay, fine, here's a challenge. So the running race ends up still being active. However, the gravity has been increased to an unreasonable levels that makes the pot start to cracking uncontrollably. It ends up having characters struggle to move very much, including, of course, the Plug that ends up falling back down to the ground because of the additional gravity. Although they can still realistically fly over. But yeah, Wall Cycle ends up just slowly ignoring everybody, and then we end up having an agreement that, okay, Candy's gonna need to go over there, alright, and do that. So Candy gets kicked over, according that apparently the one condition is that you shall serve. Wait, what did you say? Wait a minute, I don't know what the deal is. Shall serve me. Okay, so alright, we got that. We got that kind of BFDIE henchman going on. So 2 years earlier. But yeah, Candy's dropping in, manages to eventually force themselves onto Wall Cycle and gets their fingers to snap, which makes the fellas go back to normal, which means and then Plug, of course, just finishes it in record time, so then they win. So that is rather interesting. I would say that I don't think that's how that would work. Like, thinking about it, I mean, it's like, like if somebody else made Thanos snap. Like, I don't know, it's just kind of difficult to imagine, because it's like, you know, how, like, it just, it raises an interesting question about, like, the way that these beings get things done, right? Like, do they have to think something and then snap, right? Because it's like, theoretically, right, if Candy were to snap the fingers of Walk Cycle, like, under that logic, wouldn't what Walk Cycle's currently thinking of happen? So if Walk Cycle was currently thinking of cheese and then they snap their fingers, wouldn't cheese appear, regardless if it's Candy that snapped the fingers for? Like, see how it's interesting? So that means that maybe Walk Cycle was thinking of the gravity, and then the stinger snaps, so that means the gravity went back to normal. Some things are, like, I don't know. I think that it is one of the most irrelevant questions of all time, by the way. But, like, it's interesting. Also, hold on. Can I talk about something? This is the most, again, another completely minor detail. You know what I'm finding suspicious? You know what I'm finding suspicious? See on this voting screen, I noticed it in the last episode, but I didn't point it out. Alright? I didn't point it out, but like, there's a bunch of white dots, right? There is this one red dot, all right? There's this one red dot that appears, is flashing, is going at a rapid speed, okay? It is going quickly, and then right as it is about to collide with Earth, the status drops by and then going to post-credit scene. I don't like that dot. I don't like that dot. That dot is suspicious. I don't know about that one. I don't know about that dot is important. You can't just have a random red dot in an end credit scene and think it's not relevant. That red dot is the most important thing, I'm telling you. I'm telling you, bro. I'm telling you. But anyways, who's getting eliminated? I don't know, because a lot of people didn't really do that much. Cole has been ignoring the challenge, but they might get sick because they're a nonchalant vibe. Mike had the interesting start. I'm going to say Mike, because, again, they refused to do the challenge, but I really don't know. In this one, I really don't know, but we're gonna need to see. But anyway, it's episode 3 time. Episode 3 of Web is titled "The Show Must Go On." It's the first episode over 10 minutes. Here we go. Okay, so that is episode 3 of Web. So things are certainly happening. So, we end up having trees make up some more environment, which is nice, of course. More environment equals good. So trees are getting planted. Apparently Spring is planting them because it turns out that if you dunk an apple into dirt, it will grow into a tree. Try this at home. But yes, we end up having some trees. I like it. I mean, it's definitely an excuse to just add more environment, but like, it's solid. I think the trees in the background make an overall nice aesthetic. And what is, by the way, a relatively well animated show. Like, there's not that much to it, quote unquote. However, it does like its job relatively well. And it's relatively clean. It's got like it's like a mildly different aesthetic. How do I say it? I'm trying to like figure out how to best point it out. It's like mildly less friggin' anti-aliased, right? that you say? You know, like anti-aliasing. Yeah, it's like mildly less anti-aliased, so just see it directly, and it makes certain things like eyes and stuff look a bit more square. But it ends up being pretty solid. And either way, we end up having War Cycle deny them team names, and then they proceed to do the elimination. Yay! 123 votes. That is more than last time by a considerable margin. And we end up having the winning contestant be Pot, who ends up getting themselves the immunity token. Yes, indeed, immunity token, which, by the way, was introduced last time. I didn't mention it because I was a bit distracted last time. I want to say, I don't like immunity token. Just saying, from a game design perspective, I think that it's kind of weird to give the contestant that already has proven by getting the most votes to have the most viewer favor get themselves an opportunity to double how much viewer favor they have, right, when they already have the most. I think it makes a lot of sense to give the MVP of a challenge, which isn't necessarily a viewer like decision, right? It's just a challenge. This is a challenge performance, like who did the best in the challenge individually speaking, right? To give them the token. That way they can double their votes, even if the viewers maybe don't like them, right? It makes way more sense, in my opinion, than giving the person with the biggest view amount of vote to save the opportunity to double their vote to save. Because, like, come on, like, I understand that they won't always be like this, but like it makes the rich richer. Anyways, we end up having the eliminated contestant ended up being Springy in the final 2 with Spider Yogurt. Yeah, Spring ends up getting eliminated. A bit unfortunate, but yeah, they just kind of ended up fading into the didn't do that much because they weren't that proactive in the challenge, while also not being like they just didn't do much, you know. Like it's a bit of a wrath of the challenge and needing to exclude them, but yeah, they end up not doing much. And out of the 2, Spring ends up, I guess, being just mildly less interesting, so they end up leaving. And as they're complaining, they end up accidentally breaking the blender. Yes, they destroy the blender. And Walk Cycle looks at them going like, what the fuck did you just do? They proceed to be like, well, we'll just have to make do. So they end up TPing themselves and their fella out of the way, which is interesting, because that means that actually, you know, they haven't been eliminated. You know, Springy has not been eliminated with the usage of the elimination pencil. They just TP'd themselves away with Walk Cycle. So that's interesting. And especially, I mean, if we presume that, like, we end up finding out that Mike, by the way, ends up hosting the show afterwards because they're a talk show host and they're the only person that can realistically even dare to do it. Of course, Pot really doesn't like them, so nobody likes this guy. But either way, he ends up just hosting it. But he seems to have somehow found the elimination pencil, which theoretically means that if the elimination pencil's there, that means that it didn't go along with the fella, right? It didn't go along with Walk Cycle. So that means that Walk Cycle didn't eliminate Springy. That's what I'm saying. I don't think Walk Cycle eliminated Springy. But either way, yeah, Mike has the elimination pencil and ends up threatening characters with the wrath of elimination. So, they end up doing what they're doing, and then we end up having the challenge, which they end up making to make an advertisement for an Apple. Relatively solid. They do struggle with the massive issue that they don't have production equipment, right? So, because, you know, there's no production equipment. So, the issue that ends up getting there, is that the only production equipment that they have is recommended characters, which actually get added into the group. Like, they're actually a relevant part of the show as people in the surrounding area, which I think is really interesting. I mean, I don't know how much they're going to do that. Presumably less, right, if the show gets more popular. But, I'd be interested to see. They end up, by the way, Plug and Candy, who got denied names, end up going like, yo, can you give us names? They promise. Also, I can promise. They end up going, okay. And then we have the team names, which ends up being the first team name called Prettiest Princesses, and the other team name ends up being called Preferably, on accident. So, yeah, good stuff. And then we end up having, the challenge, and here we go. We end up having, a couple of conversations, a couple of people trying to protest, going like, yo, I'm not gonna do the challenge. Pot doesn't want to do the challenge, because they, for some reason, really don't like Mike. I don't exactly know why they have such a visceral hatred of Mike, right? Like, they're annoying, but they're annoying in the same way that Candy's annoying, you know? Like, it's, but nobody hates Candy that much, right? So it's kind of one of those things, is that I don't really get it. I don't get the, like, ultra hatred, right? That's, like, the type of hatred, like, this fella must have done something to you, you know? Like, for Paul to hate this guy this much. But either way, yeah, they end up eventually getting forced to do the challenge. And it turns out they end up having some fella. We end up having Candy and the yogurt talk to this light switch called Alyssa, which apparently travels the world looking for interesting things. Good to know. I don't know why we're getting this information, but good to know. But yeah, they end up dipping away and walking by. What, are they just gonna waltz into another show? I'm sorry, they're just gonna show up. But out of the recommended contestants, they end up the iPad ends up getting used for the advertising that Paper forces them to do, right? Because he's gonna be the host star, and then eventually the other team ends up getting a last second speed run of it. Like, they get 1 second to do the thing. Yogurt, who is the only character, is actually trying in their team, right? But either way, we end up having... Wait, is that corn dog? Is it? I feel like it is. But, okay. Anyway, it was one of the recommended characters. We end up picking up 2 random to be judges, and the judges end up judging. The first advertisement is not great, but it counts as an advertisement, so it gets a 16 out of 30, which, fair enough. The second one is the 1-second phone recording of a yogurt going like, "Hey, Apple, buy." Okay. Which, I mean, look, here's the deal. It's not a great advertisement. However, I mean, it was recorded vertically, which is progressive, right? We got ourselves some short form content. We got that attention span. Keep it like, hey, buy this Apple. We're not getting into the nitty gritty here on the details, because who wants to listen to the nitty gritty of the details, right? So I mean, like, there's some spicy stuff going. I wouldn't give it that low of a score. I would, if it goes for the first advertisement, I'd give it like a 6. And then for this one, I would give it like a 4. Right? I would say that they're not that far away to each other as the joke is intended, but like yeah. Eventually, because it's Mike's team, they end up, of course, making their scores 10s out of 10s all around for cheating purposes. So yeah, Mike ends up successfully cheating. Then we end up having a vote to save. I think I'm just bad at predicting vote to saves. I'm gonna be Container didn't do anything. Container didn't show up in this video. They showed up. They walked. If look, I'm gonna predict Container again. All right, I don't know, but I'm gonna predict Container again. Let's say Container gets out, okay? But I don't really know. It turns out that actually, beyond just the weird red dot that ends up flying over, that ends up also marking the screen is getting covered. I didn't realize because it's already gray, so it's just a different gray that was rolling over the other gray. It's probably that one thing in the sky, right, that they mentioned in the post-credit scene, right? They mentioned that there was like a thing in the sky that's important. I don't know what that is, because it's square. That's kind of the weird part about it. Like, it's not a circle, so it's not like a giant moon. You'll think that, oh, okay, if the gravity went up, maybe the issue is that the moon is getting closer to Earth, right? That was like my initial theory. However, first of all, there's been a thing since episode 1, right? Like, the first episode already had this, and second thing is square. So unless it's like a Minecraft moon, that means that I don't really know what's happening. So, yeah, I don't know. Anyways, Walk Cycle is in this tiniest room of all time, and they've apparently made an epic blender. They made an new and improved blender. It turns out that Walk Cycle has actually invented Blender. You know, the blending is not technology that anybody was aware of before. Because somehow none of them exist. I'm sorry, Alyssa, did you never find a blender? But anyway, they end up TPing back to go do their show. I don't think, I'm going to be honest, I'm not 100% confident that Mike isn't just going to get absolutely demolished. I don't know. I don't think Walk Cycle is going to like Mike's hosting duties. I'm gonna be honest. But anyways, what am I actually thinking of the show, by the way? Because you'll notice that I'm talking very in-universe. Because I've honestly not had a lot of tips. It's just fun. It's fun. This is a good show. So far, these first 3 episodes have definitely been pretty solid. I've had kind of very little to critique here. You know, I mean, there's a couple the game design components, like, you know, the token, which I think is kind of lame. But like, other than that, I mean, like, overall, Web's a relatively solid host. They're like kind of mean, but you have to provoke. Like, you know, they're kind of do in their own world until you provoke them, right? Like, they're not just straight up mean for no reason. The contestants have a nice balance of unique. Some are kind, some don't speak much, some speak a lot, right? So there's a relatively nice to that, and it's relatively easy to catch their names because it's not a large cast, right? It's like, at the end of the day, it's not that many characters, so he's doing pretty solid, right? It's way easier to make a small cast work, but it's doing its job, right? Relatively well. So yeah, the challenges are, again, the show overall looks good. It's got its own little style switch up to it, and then it ends up looking pretty good. So far, audio is not something that I've really had to notice, which means that it was all pretty solid. Yeah, so far So that's pretty solid. Of course, again, the show hasn't. The show's in the early days, right? The show starts, I believe, daring more as more time passes. So we're gonna need to wait for it, but it's interesting. Episode 4 of Web is titled Pencil Peril. Here we go. Alright, so that will mark episode 4 of Web Pencil Peril. So, it's a relatively interesting episode, some things happening. I feel like this show definitely has a couple of biases. Gonna be honest, like, I do feel like screen time in this show is not very commonly allocated, right? Like, Pot gets so much screen time. You know, and you can tell, I don't know, I think Pot's a very cool character, because of how they get written. Like, you can really see, it's definitely the most fleshed out personality-wise. You know, they've got a lot of quirks, but also a lot of, like, you know, positive. And you can tell the personality is, like, a little bit, like, you know, mildly annoyed. But they're also, but they're, like, a bit silly. They're, like, fun, right? Like, they're a fun character to watch, so I understand why they get a lot of screen time. But holy shit, they get a lot of screen time. Like, if there was, like, those K-pop visualizers with everybody speaking time, there's no way this isn't the most. But yeah, Mike ends up going over to host the elimination. As we do, Mike ends up forming a random stage with the pencil and proceeding to host the elimination there for the prettiest princesses, where the eliminated contestant ends up being Paper, who gets eliminated out of the 347 votes. The number is like 3xing every time. But indeed, that is what is going on. 58 votes. I got it wrong again. I'm just bad at predicting vote to saves. I'm gonna be for real. But it does make sense. I mean, Paper's one of the, like, they did the challenge. I mean, okay, I'd still vote off Container. I think that this show is, unfortunately, the viewers are highly disappointing me here. I'm gonna be 100% for real. You know, because I've started, because, like, there is the type of thing where it's like you vote a contestant in to be funny. However, a lot of the time, you know, I like, in shows, I've noticed that viewers care about the health of the show. That's kind of depends, right? Do the viewers care about the health of the show? Because if you care about the health of the show, I feel like you would eliminate a character like Container because they're not doing anything, right? So for the health of the show, right, you're eliminating the character that doesn't give you any writing creativity at all, right? For example, right, in Woes, right, the character gets eliminated. It's Mangosteen, who's the character that doesn't do anything, right? They're immobile. And despite the fact that there was a clear worst member in their team, right, mean member through the challenge and everything, they didn't get out because we were thinking of the health of the show, and we ended up eliminating that contestant, right? However, in this situation, right, especially since vote to saves allow for less of it, the trolling kind of ends up taking over, and therefore that means that the audience that has ended up watching this show does not care as much about the health of the show, which means the Container gets to stick around for trolling reasons, even though that actively makes the show worse because we have a filler slot, right? We just have a filler contestant. But either way, right as the elimination pencil is about to get used, we end up having this fella come back, Wall Cycle come back, go like, what the fuck are you doing? Yes, they are indeed not very happy. However, they end up being, hey, if you touch the elimination pencil again, you'll end up like Springy. Yes, it turns out, okay, I misunderstood this the other time. It's like I don't know why I'm understanding the previous episode in the middle of the next. But okay, I think that what's happening is that since Springy's made out of metal, we turn Springy into the blender that is the prize. I think that's the idea of what happened. So okay, I see. I'm understanding. But either way, we end up having Wall Cycle, well, of course, give the tokens away, and then we end up having the challenge after the recommended contestants get sent to the underground cave system, which is a surprisingly good acronym for what it is. And then having the challenge, WCEB doesn't know about the team names having changed, but they end up accepting it reluctantly that they ended up changing the team name. And end up going over the team names. They know the team names, by the way, but either way, yes, they end up sharing the names. And the challenge is to make the most money at your stand. Make the most money and you win. There's a bunch of random doodads over there, and indeed they get to go off. So Candy is forced to really do the only thing for their team because for some reason, because Container doesn't exist, and Pluggy can't exactly do much because they don't have arms or limbs in general. I disagree, actually, quite a bit with the ask that Pluggy can't do anything. I think that is that's not correct. I believe that, Pluggy, as we saw in the last episode, acts as a great transportation device. So when it comes, you can have Candy grab a thing and then you bring it over and then Candy grab it. It would be a very good navigational tool, but no, Pluggy ends up bowing out of the challenge themselves, and Candy is going off to do it on his own. In the meantime, we end up having the idea that Potter may use the elimination pencil a little bit to create a quick item. However, they accidentally end up putting the elimination pencil up for sale. I'm not sure how you do this on accident, but they managed to do this on accident, and therefore the fellow that came along just bought the elimination pencil. So they end up driving over. They managed to get Wall Cycle to create a car, beep beep, and then we end up going over there. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I am... If for the meanwhile that I'm pretty sad, despite a lot of screen time, I'm pretty satisfied by how Pot is written. I feel like there's a lot of depth there. I feel like Cole has massively worsened. This cat, you are pretty terrible. Because here's the deal. In episodes 1 and 2, you end up having Cole be the I don't care character, right? The character that's super low energy, but they don't really care to do challenges or to do much, right? They just kind of want to chill, maybe have a conversation. They don't want to have conversations, right? They're just kind of there. Okay, but especially in this episode, a bit in the last, but especially in this episode, I mean, we've just turned this guy into stupid. I don't know what happened. He just does, because now, Cole is low energy because they don't know anything. They act like questioning. They just ask, they just don't know anything. What is this? I don't understand. I don't understand. You weren't like this. Where did you get lobotomized? What happened? You were not like this. You were just a guy who didn't care to do stuff. Now you're a guy who doesn't know what anything is. You have firmly changed. Why have you changed? This is bad. Don't like this. Why did we do that? Why did we turn this? Why were we I'm gonna turn this character into a moron? What is this? What is the point? If you were started like this, okay, but this is a for no reason you've become clueless about life. There's no... But whatever. Anyway, Yogurt ends up going over. Candy decides to help out. Yogurt decides to help out Candy after Candy successfully being okay, let's help ourselves out. And they end up helping out Candy, which does end up working. However, of course, that ends up getting majorly called out because, you're helping out the opposite team. And, of course, because everybody else was gone over to the city to fetch back the pencil, which, by the way, the pencil was off in a museum, by the way, and for some reason some book guy wanted to steal it until they eventually get defeated. Cole ends up holding onto the pencil, and apparently that gives him a lot of energy. I don't know. This character just became stupid. I don't know what happened. I don't know. Their IQ dropped by 100 points, and their IQ was 99. So now they have -1. So either way, they're doing their thing. And then we, Cycle just pissed off at Mike the whole time. But yeah, it's not a great performance from Yogurt. Yogurt just completely stopped caring about, their team, he just didn't think about it. So, it turns out that Candy and Yogurt ends up helping out. To be fair, Candy ends up hiding this fact from Pluggy, but I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, it's not Candy's fault. Like, Candy was just like, yo, can you help me out, please? And then Yoga was like, okay. It's like, Candy didn't do that much. You know, there wasn't any forceful action that was being taken, right? Like, it was all, you know, fun and games. You know, it was all questions. And Candy was like, yo, I want to do it. And Yoga was like, okay. Right? I think it's fair. Anyways, we have ourselves to the voting screen. Who's getting out? I don't know. I want it to be Cole, because Cole has become really, really bad. However, I don't know who does the least in this team, because all of them do something. But I feel, again, if it's a vote to eliminate, I mean, Yogurt pretty easily. In a vote to save, I feel like Paul gets a lot of votes. Yogurt might get, I think, well, I don't know, by process of relevancy, maybe Mike, although Mike, of course, is important in this episode, but I'm gonna say Mike, but I have no idea. Okay, as you can obviously tell, I have no idea. Anyways, Mike goes over to forming a Grayson for their stage, and of course, Pot doesn't like it. Sometimes you're just mean for no reason. But okay. Well, that was web number 4. It is time to dunk into web number 5, because it's titled, This Episode is Also About Basketball. I don't know why it's also about basketball, because what was the first one also means that there was a first episode about basketball, but as far as I'm aware, none of these 4 videos that I've watched are about basketball. So I don't know what this is. Well, we're going to find out. Here we go. Okay, so that is episode 5 of Web. I'm gonna be honest, one thing about this show that I absolutely complimented for, and it is something that it's really hard to quantify, right? Like, I would debate that it's impossible to quantify. However, I do believe that it is a positive about this show, right? It is incredibly easy to watch. You know, like, as far as just watching the episodes, because, like, there have been certain, because, I don't know, depending on the show, right, 15 minutes can feel like a lot or not a lot. These 15 minutes felt like nothing. It felt like that, it just happened, you know, like, it was quick, it was fun, right, and I feel like that is something to, and I think, like, how do you measure it, like, why, right, like, that's the question, why is it such an easy watch? And I think it's just because of a general polishness, right? Like, there's a general polishness of, like, you understand everything pretty much, right? Like, you know, it's giving you the entire, this show gives itself it deals a good hand, basically, is what I would say the show does, right? It gives itself a relatively good situation where it's not actually got a lot to deal with, right? Like, it's got about 4 places that are important, like 7 characters, 1 host, like, in general, it's not got too much going on, right? Especially if you consider that, you know, at the end of the day, it doesn't try to diverge too much as well within the characters themselves, right? Like, walk cycle is extremely standard by object show host standards, right? They're a bit nicer than the average algebraian. Like, they're actually trying to be helpful rather than the usual algebraian. However, at the end of the day, they've still got so many algebraianistic qualities where, like, it also leeches off of other knowledge, right? So it goes with, for example, nearly every object show ever made is set in a grassland, and there's a city there somewhere that for some reason the contestants don't live in, right? Like, that's the goes at every show. So the fact that it's in this one, right? So by playing on taking elements from other stuff, right, and also just not giving itself too many unique things, it makes itself a show where, like, within 1 episode, you already get it. Like, as far as, by episode 2 already was fully locked in. I was like, okay, I understand everything, right? So that means that right now, this show just gets to happen, and it's cool, right? So that's the best way that I can describe why it's easy to watch, right? It's a very polished thing, and it deals itself a good hand. Anyways, it turns out that the fellas Mike, Jug, and Cole are wanted because they stole the artifact from the museum, which indeed they did do. And in the meantime, the object in the sky remains to be a problem. You know, they keep being problematic, but yeah, I think the styling of the trees have changed a little bit, or at least, I don't know, the ones that are closer, I think, are a little bit different. But yeah, we end up having Cole, which doesn't remember anything. Cole ends up showing up a lot in this episode. I don't really know what Cole is. Okay, so the random Cole personality swap, I feel like we gotta, I don't exactly know what this new personality is. It's like, very... What are you? What is this character? It's like a low energy, doesn't care, but is aware, but isn't aware, but is I don't know what this guy is. Okay, this guy doesn't make sense. All right, they're just the guy. Okay, they're just there to be the goofball. Yeah, not necessarily the goofball. They're just there to be kind of the doesn't really know what's going on goofball that gets dragged around by somebody else. Basically, that's kind of what Cole is. I'm not a big fan. I'm gonna be 100% for you. But either way, they end up doing that. Candy and Spider Yoga keep doing their own shenanigans. And then we end up having Jug ask Walkcycle about the pencil, and apparently it figures out that the elimination pencil has a lot of energy within it, so that means that you'll get a lot of energy for it. Which means that since Cole is generally a low energy being, they end up taking that extra energy directly to her, and that makes them kind of go crazy, right? While in the meantime, it's interesting because that mean both Jug and also Mike then presumably have the energy to handle it, because they didn't feel the effects of the pencil when they picked it up compared to the rest of them. So that's interesting. But either way, we're having the elimination time, where it was too annoying to animate the drawing. I mean, I guess. Okay, fair enough. We gotta draw every number. I wonder if you could reuse animations for it. Surely you can, right? I mean, like, you just gotta draw. I mean, I wonder, could you? I don't know how animating works, but I'm thinking, because it's like, if you think about it, the hand motions that would need to be made to draw a number, right? Like, there's only like 10 possible that it could be, right? So then if you could find a way to standardize those 10 animations and be able to use them, that would be interesting. No, I don't know. I feel like I feel like there is a way to make it work, but I don't really know. I don't know animation, so I have no idea. But either way, we had having the eliminated contestant be Mike. Which Walkcycle is very, very excited about. But yes, I actually got it right once, and what I believe, I was very not confident about this. But yeah, Mike ends up kind of not having much of a reason to vote for them. So yeah, they end up getting eliminated. They call it outrageous, and then they get firmly puked by the pencil. So yeah. Alright, well, we end up having the chance. Apparently, Walkcycle took the token just in case. What was that? I mean, like, it was a cheated token, but you didn't need to cheat it out. I'm just saying. And I don't know how you know that token's there. But either way, yeah, we end up having the host arrive late. Like, the host gets procedurally more annoyed that keeps complaining about this guy's challenges. Yeah, I mean, like, you gotta do one hoop and the spawn and tape. Yeah, I don't know why you're this annoyed at challenge. I don't, like, what do you want? I need can't Pluggy the elimination pencil. What is Pluggy's challenge? I need to see Pluggy's grand challenge idea. You know, like this. I'm sure there's something cooking up in there that's so smart. You know, like something's cooking. Like, what challenge would you come up with? I guess maybe you're just pissed that you can't participate in any challenge. To be fair, that is definitely a problem. Even though, again, I mean, in the last challenge, absolutely, Pluggy just, like, in the vending challenge, no, in my opinion, that's absolutely, Pluggy just decides to write herself out of that challenge. right? Because like there is no reason why you can't do that. Like stand at the vending, like I don't know, if you can't grab the thing, stand behind and sell. Do sales pitching, you know, like be like, hey, we're buying things, right? Like, hey, selling potatoes, right? Like you can do that. You could be a sales vendor then, right? And then have Candy pick up the equipment, right? Do something. You need to vary. You can't just be like, nope, can't do this, no arm, no limbs. Like, come on. But either way, the challenge is to land one basketball, like one little, go get the ball in the hoop once. Okay, not that difficult in theory. However, it turns out that the first throw that Cole proceeds to do gets tackled at the last second by their own team, by a Spider Yogurt, who ends up shooting it straight over onto the cube, which isn't great. Jug gets quite upset at him. Why did he do this? It's Candy gonna be for it. I mean, there's not really much of another explanation that makes sense. They wanted to protect them, I guess, and I mean, like, it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I will, like, the thing is that they don't watch each other's eliminations, right? Which means that, but like, this guy doesn't know that Candy's nearly always the first one safe, and that he's the first one safe. Like, they're the first one safe in each other's teams. So, like, if you win the challenge, like, Candy's not going home, like, realistically speaking. But either way, the policemen arrive, and Cole and Jug proceed to run away from the policemen. And they, continue off their running. In the meantime, the rest of them end up not really having much to do, because they're not really a basketball. And Candy wants to figure out what the hell's within the container. Right? Isn't that an interesting question? So they proceed to go check. It turns out to be like a hallway. I don't really know. But then going into the hallway, and Candy sees something at the end of the hallway. Or at least thinks there's something, and then eventually it ends up closing itself, which is that presumably there is something in the container. I'm glad that we managed to stall out container by not eliminating them when they did nothing, and now container actually is something, and now they're gonna get eliminated. It would trust. But like, I don't think they will, but like, it'd be interesting if they did. But maybe they will. They still could, by the way. It's an interesting debate. But anyway, yeah, that makes it interesting. You know, now there's a reason to wanna to do container. You know, it took 5 episodes to write anything for container, but I'm glad that we did do that at least a little bit. But yeah, anyway, Cole for some reason wants to look at the McDonald's that is there, because this guy, what happened? This guy, no, really, did I look at episode 1 and 2 badly? Was Cole always like this? Am I just bad? Am I just bad? I swear this, maybe I wasn't paying attention. There is a very good possibility that I was not paying enough attention, because I swear that this guy randomly became a doofus. Like, what happened? Like, Cole did not speak like this. Cole's speaking like a blueberry from Object Cringe. Like, what are you doing? You're speaking like that one character. The Concept is one of these characters. I don't remember who you are. There's a character in Concept that does this, okay? I don't know where you dude, what were you? Oh, gosh. I don't currently remember. But, like, there's a character like that in there. Not Chargy. Whatever, I don't care. But, like, there's a character that tosses these, like, goofy, I don't really know what's going on with. The core joints are getting drunk by the jug, which makes it green, right? So then they'll be like, no, I'm Cordial Jug. So they do that. And then there's Cordial Cole as well. So they proceeded to hide away, and until Cole at the last second says Jug, they proceed to do nothing, and they go back to running away until the basketball that somehow the plot convenience 1 million, it ends up getting launched up into the cube, bouncing down, and then landing on the book. Who stole the thing? Which, by the way, okay, here's the deal. I don't know why this book is that worried about. Oh, I didn't steal the pencil. Well, you did though. No, like you didn't though. You know, like the whole thing about it is that the pencil was one of the items on display. So you gave the money and you bought the pencil. Right? So, like, technically, no. The book performed an entirely legal maneuver by buying the pencil. You know. So like there wasn't like it was not stolen. It literally was not stolen. It was just bought. They bought the pens without the fellas realizing that it was up for sale, right? But like it was that you bought it, but and by the rules of buying, you paid the money and you got it, right? So like they literally weren't doing anything illegal. I don't know why books they were trying acting like it was illegal, because it literally wasn't. Like they didn't do something in the wrong. And like nothing was in the wrong until the moment where the screen fellow, I stalky or whatever you call it, yeah, because you stalk images, gets killed. Like until then they weren't actually criminals, but well, they technically were, because again they did steal the pencil, and it was bought legally. But like now then they're actually screwed. Then they're running away at high speed. Somehow the basketball lands perfectly in the Pretty Princess. Okay, I don't. Come on, you could have at least made it drop by nearby and then a throw got landed. There's no way. It bounced from. You telling me it bounced from the city street to the hoop? How the fuck am I supposed to believe that? I know that, look, sometimes in object shows, you gotta do, something in media, okay, you gotta do suspension of disbelief, which is suspending that something couldn't realistically happen and just allowing it to happen anyways. But at a certain point, what the fuck? Like, come on, that would not happen. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? But either way, that means that the Pretty Princesses are up for elimination, and precisely, despite not really doing much, is safe. We end up discovering that apparently Walkcycle has a history with the policeman, because they caught him before, but now Walkcycle's powerful, which is interesting. So I don't exactly know what's going on with Walkcycle, but yeah, Walkcycle got caught before, and now is all powerful, so they can't catch him. But that's interesting. You know, there's a backstory there. And in the meantime, what do we discover? We discovered that I believe Springy ends up getting reincarnated as the post-credit scene. They end up getting reincarnated as a blender. They don't have legs, but they do have arms. They end up mining out of their little box and end up in a bigger, just a place. My presumption, from looking at it, is that looks like the box in the sky, like the big cube. So my presumption is that it's the big cube, right? I think that's what it is. I think it's the big cube. And yeah, so yeah, that's the presumption. Done the elimination. We have a new team. We have a new type of screen here with the recommended characters on the left and the voting icons over on the right. It's worse. So much worse. I'm not gonna lie. The other one was so moody. Come on, the other elimination game was moody. This one's boring. But either way, who do you want to say? I don't know. Like, Container is a realistic. Okay, Candy should be safe because they just talk a lot and they're very they're very personality, right? Container has the very interesting episode, of course, with there's something in the container, right? So you might want to keep a Container around because of it. And Container already got votes because of trolling. However, Container used to get votes because of trolling, right? Because the character doesn't do anything. So now that they have a plot point attached to it, maybe those trollers aren't going to vote for them, basically. So and then we have Play, who you can feel a bit bad for because like they are constantly complaining, but Wall Psycho still does lash out on them a little bit. And they have some fun scenes. So you know what? I'm gonna go on a boat here. I'm gonna say Container gets eliminated. I don't know. I'm gonna give it I promise. Okay, look, I promise. If Container doesn't get eliminated, I'm not predicting Container ever again. Okay, I'm not predicting Container ever again. Okay, that's my promise right here to you. Okay. Episode 6 of Web. It is titled KABLOOEY. KABLOOEY. Here we go. Alright, so that is episode 6 of Web. Another pretty solid episode. Yeah, I'm telling you, this series is very solid. There's like not much to it. I do believe that this is my favorite episode. This episode was very complex in a way that you don't necessarily notice, right? It's kind of one of those things where it really shows off writing capability of in this one. I think that, well, the other episode, I think that the writing in this show is relatively solid, and I was always pretty solid when it came to praising writing quality for stuff like this. Same thing goes, even BFPR, I remember it praises writing quite a bit. I thought that it was pretty smart. I think that this show is also written pretty smart, but you can really see that shining in this episode during the argument, because if you think about it, there's a lot of sides to this argument, and the pacing of how it works. Like, this is not easy. There's a lot of fine details that need to be landed for that scene, or for just that moment to work, right? There's a lot. Because it has to play it so fast, it has to play it so, of course, again, with different voices and recorded different times. So there's a good job done in audio editing. There's a good job done in lines to make them, relatively conscious with each other, because there's a lot of people cutting each other off. So that means that, of course, the cut-offs have to feel natural and correct. A lot of that's doing it correct. It's all stuff that you don't think about, because, the big boys tend to get it right because they locked it down. However, you gotta still be able to point it out here when it's something here, because I feel like this scene really shows it off, because it's a long lasting scene. It's pretty much it's the nitty gritty of the episode, rather than just a tiny moment. It is, and that is quite a challenge. Not in the not in the episode. It's quite a challenge to make an episode like this. So I think that even though it's not that much of a challenge environmentally, even though we do get to see a bunch of new environments in the episode. In general, I think that there's a lot of interesting things. Either way, Candy wants to go figure out what's going on with the cube right before Warx ends up noticing that and ends up stopping Candy midway through with a levitation effect. So yeah, that cube is definitely Warx cube, right? Surely it has to be Warx. That is your cube. The blender is in there. It just has to be. There's no way. But anyway, we end up hosting the elimination in space because of the floating effect taking 2 minutes. Does it take 2 minutes for this elimination to end? Oh my god, it actually does. Wait, 3:08, and then wait, when does he say the line? There's about do we second? Wait, wears off for another 2 minutes. Okay, almost. It takes 2 minutes and 15 seconds. Okay, for the ring to wear off. It was so close. Imagine it lasted 2 minutes. That would actually have been the coolest thing. But no, unfortunately it didn't. Anyway, we end up having the elimination where the eliminated contestant is okay, here's the deal. I got it correct by the biggest technicality in the world. So I get it wrong in terms of the voting counts by 4. It turns out the container gets 70 votes compared to the 66 of Pluggy. I think that's the type of level where it's I think it's a very valid prediction if I'm 4 away. But then I actually get it correct technically because Candy wants to save Pluggy at the last moment because they're sort of scared of... I don't know, they just don't want Container around. Warx ends up allowing it this time. And then proceeds to, even though, Warx would have been very happy to just eliminate Pluggy, considering that is the character that has been annoying them constantly. But, yes, it turns out that the container ends up getting eliminated before they can really do too much. I think this is really interesting. At the end of the day, I think it's fair enough, because here's the deal. Yes, we were doing a thing with container now. However, by the fact it took 5 episodes, right, to do a thing with container, I definitely believe, right, that Container was supposed to be the throwaway character immediately. They ended up kind of sticking around, which is annoying, right? And then eventually we were like, okay, if this guy's sticking around, we gotta write something with it, right? But then when they saw the opportunity to, just because it was so close, to eliminate Container, they were like, okay, we're gonna find out a way to eliminate Container. right? Because at the end of the day, you know, if it took them 5 episodes to try to write up a storyline. However, like in general, you can tell that it wasn't what we wanted to do, right? Like it wasn't the main focus. We would have done it earlier. So yeah. However, I will say that the way that it happens maybe isn't the greatest though, because I mean, like, Candy did seem very interested in finding out what was in the container, right? Like, Pluggy was scared. Like, if it was Pluggy to Candy, I would be very confident that would happen. However, Candy kind of did want to see what was up with the container, right? So, I'm a bit surprised that Candy decided to eliminate container instead of keeping the container around to explore further, because I feel like that's what Candy would have done, at least last episode. I don't know if there was a change of mind, especially because in the last episode they're relieved, like, ooh, I'm glad that they're gone, right? But either way, yeah, so we end up having the spider yogurt wanting to talk to Jug. Jug proceeds to just tell him to go away. They don't care. They're just like, leave immediately. They just rather be on the other team. But thankfully, we really get to be on the merge, which is pretty nice. As we end up having, Y-Cycle announced the merge. The challenge is at the halfway point to do the rock game again, to do the rock climb, because, I mean, the rock's still there. We gotta reuse it. Have you never? Come on. If you think Y-Cycle needs to host the next Olympics, we're reusing all of the facilities. But, like, that might have been one of the dumbest things I've ever said. But, either way, yeah, Pluggy ends up complaining again, because we're just doing the same challenge. And, I mean, like, it is really, to be fair, this time Pluggy's very fair. Pluggy is like hilariously fair to the point where it's like, you win this challenge, just fucking do it. You know, like, it's interesting, the complaints, because, like, yeah, I mean, you could have just taken it and then you would have won, because you could get there the fastest. Like, we know that from before, like, nothing would have changed. So like, Pluggy is actively losing out on opportunity to win for the sake of doing a better challenge, quote unquote, which I think is, it's kind of interesting. But either way, Y-Cycle ends up lashing out back again, and decides to make the challenge be to make a challenge, and they're getting to submit one challenge, and they all have to work together to pull off, well, the challenge. So, we end up having themselves suggest a bunch of challenges. So, what is everybody's main suggestion? Candy suggests an obstacle course, okay? Which is which Candy wants to do to make it difficult, which is interesting. Then, freaking spider yogurt ends up going like, hey, aren't we supposed to make the challenges easier for us? I think, you know, they're sort of realizing that, you know, they have to help Candy usually, so having this challenge that Candy can't really do, they end up trying to, like, even though yogurt of course will be advantaged by their additional limbs, and theoretically Pluggy could also just fly over everything, so that challenge will be very easy for the two of them. But anyway, we end up having yogurt. So, hold on. Okay, how about this? Let's actually judge these ideas, okay? Because, you know, I'm out here talking about, oh, this challenge idea good, this challenge idea bad. You know, I'm being the same thing. But let's actually judge these challenge ideas, okay? Obstacle course is a very solid challenge in theory. It needs to be, however, grounded. The problem is Pluggy's here, right? So the thing about Pluggy being here is that that doesn't work. You can do an obstacle course challenge, but Pluggy can't be here. Like, the fact that Spider can, I guess, have the additional limbs, yes, that's okay, because they still have to go through the obstacles. They're just doing it using their own body type. The thing about it is that you can just fly over the obstacles, right? Like, unless you put a really, really low ceiling. But if you but again, even then, you can just hug the ceiling, right? So, Pluggy being there eliminates the possibility of that challenge for now. So I would say, no to that challenge personally. Then a puzzle challenge to test our intellect. I mean, the screen shows a jigsaw puzzle, so maybe something along those lines. What the idea would be. Cole ends up rejecting it because then they have to think, and they don't like thinking. Again, I don't know what happened to Cole. They took Cole's brain and shot it out back, but either way, yes, they end up having this puzzle challenge. What do I think of a jigsaw puzzle as a challenge? It's boring. I mean, to be 100% honest, it's boring. Like, you'll notice, fun fact, the shortest episode of BFDI is the one where they do a jigsaw challenge. But, like, it's not great. Like, if the one where they do a jigsaw puzzle, and in that episode they had to stall it out by like 2 minutes because a team didn't figure out that the pieces were in reverse, right? So like, and that episode's already 4 minutes and they had to stall it for 2. So yeah, no, a jigsaw puzzle isn't a very entertaining challenge. However, it's like, in terms of how good it is as a challenge, it's relatively okay in terms of strategy. I also don't think that jigsaw puzzles are that good as puzzles, because they're kind of more, they're more so kind of finding, right? Because they have to find what fits, right? Like, there's a bit of strategy too, but it's not like that much. I wouldn't really say that. I wouldn't really give a lot to that challenge, you know? Like, again, it makes sense as an additional component to an idea, but not really. Anyways, Pluggy ends up going over because, you know, I guess they're complaining. Jug ends up just telling him to go anyways. I don't know, they're just pissed at the world. To be fair, they have had like a million body, but like, changes. You know, I don't know how to say it. They've cracked like 7 tires. They can't use one of their eyes. They've drank cordial, now they're green. Like, it's not great anyways. They proceed to think of an epic challenge, which is jumping off a swimming pool with sharks in it. It's like a diving into a swimming pool, which with fire and everything. Is it good? Okay, well, it's not super original. I mean, of course, it's one of the first challenges for Total Drama, and it's the first challenge for my eye. But yes, it's mainly close. It's the first challenge from Total Drama. Actually, is it the first challenge? It's one of the first challenges for Total Drama. However, it's on a swimming pool rather than a vat, right? And also, Pluggy can't do this challenge as well, right? But that's the wrath of the flying contestant with no limbs, right? I don't know how you would do this challenge, so no, I wouldn't approve of this. And also, the fire makes it physically impossible to perform. So what the fuck does that even mean? But yeah. Anyway, so we end up having Jug deciding that maybe we could do a fighting challenge. You can test our strength, right? Do a 1v1 round per round, and then the last person standing wins. So would this be a good challenge? It'll be okay as a challenge. If they want an originality challenge, this wouldn't be the one. Why? Because BFDI does this. BFDI did this in the episode after David joined. Why do I remember this so clearly? Because of course they used it. They used it in an episode of BFDIE. But yeah, it's not like a super unique challenge, but it's not a bad challenge idea. I think bracketed challenges are a very underrated section, though. I think they give a lot of potentials, especially if the losers face each other, because again, it writes out characters and it gives more screen time to the characters that are going to lose, which means that you get to judge their performance accordingly, right? And usually losing also gives you, you know, like losing a matchup usually gives you more sympathy. So in general, it's going to make the voting a little bit more contested because there's going to be a bunch of characters that you have sympathy for. So I actually do like the idea of bracketed challenges. However, a bracketed, like, fighting challenge, of course, has already been done, but overall, relatively solid idea from Jug, probably the best one yet. And in the meantime, we end up having Cole proceed to do a sleeping challenge. The idea is to do a sleeping challenge here. Why? It could be a potential idea. I mean, I guess it's just kind of who sleeps the most. But, well, I mean, I think that, here's the deal. This challenge is not interesting at a surface level, right? And it's also impossible to measure, right? Like who sleeps the longest. However, I do believe that it would be a good object show challenge because there's it's very easy to make this entertaining, and then you get to do a lot of different stuff with it, right? Like if you, for example, be like, oh, your job is like be the last one to stay asleep, however, nightmare. Right, like, you know, like if with an algebra and the codes, they can do anything. So their powers could possibly change your dream, right? So your dream becomes scarier and scarier and scarier, or becomes like more, you know, like something bad happens in the dream, right? Whether it's like a bad memory or like a nightmare or whatever. So it's like that happens to each one of the contestants, and then if they wake up scared or, you know, frustrated or anything, they get out, right? So it's the person who can confront their problems the most that will be safe, right? So for example, that would be a good chance. So it is probably the best challenge idea if War Cycle helps out on it. If it just sleep the most, then it's boring. Right? So Anyways, they end up disagreeing on it constantly, and I think this argument does point out the very solid existence of like a thing that I noticed does happen a lot. It's like, you'll notice a challenge idea is never deemed good in an object show. You'll notice a team name is never deemed good in an object. No, really, team name. Have you ever seen a team name be good, quote unquote, in an object show? No, really, be 100% honest. Have you ever, like, I've literally never seen an object show team name be considered good by the show itself. It's always either the contestants say it sucks or the host says it. There's never been a time where the contestant and the host have both agreed a team name is good. It's always bad. It has to be bad at this point. It'd be cooler if the team name was good, because it never is. Right? And same thing goes for challenges, you know? Because, like, it's one of those constantly displayed. It's one of those display negativity, never display positivity, right? So I think this is a very interesting way to showcase that, right? Is that, like, with every challenge, who dislikes it constantly starts speaking up, right? Same thing goes for, like, the challenges here, right? Like, play constantly speaks up about the challenges, right? Which means that we end up having the like situation be like, you get this constant flow of, like, negative feedback, right? Because you keep pointing out negative things about the challenges, right? And then you never get the positive feedback when you say, like, is this, like, was the challenge good? And at the end of the day, and like, this is something that's kind of inevitable with giving criticism, right? Is that when you give criticism, right, the criticism that's more, like, at the end of the day, the criticism that's more important to hear, right, is the criticism directly is critiquing, right, which is a negative thing by in its core, right? Because I know I'm talking way too long about this, but give me a moment, okay? The critiquing is more important than, you know, positivity, because, like, if you're doing something well, you should keep doing it, but, like, you know, there's not that much saying why you did well, because you probably know, right? Like, that's kind of one of those things. And, you know, it even hits up for something like this, right? Where, like, in this show, you know, like, when I'm talking, I tend to give, of course, critiques that are a little bit more on the negative end. I try to definitely say the positive. I try to obviously say what I'm enjoying about the episodes, what I'm thinking is good. But of course, you know, I do put in at the end a little bit of a focus in what I think of like, things in a more critical way, right? Because even if something is good, I mean, it can be better. It was my favorite episode. I'm talking about it for 1 million years. Okay, shall we spit through the rest of this, because we're absolutely overdue on time. We're overrunning the time of this for ages. Anyways, eventually, after Jug and Yogurt end up having 1 million discussion, then we're discovering a bomb. The bomb is about to explode if they don't submit the challenge in time. So, which they managed to realize. They eventually decided to submit whatever the fuck. They ended up submitting the obstacle course, with a couple of additions from everybody else. So they actually end up collaborating, which is pretty cool. And they end up submitting the challenge in time before the bomb explodes. Apparently, according to the fellow, it was a stopwatch and there wasn't actually a bomb there. But, I mean, who can truly know? Right? Also, wait a minute. Isn't a stopwatch supposed to go up? Hold on a minute. I don't think we know what a stopwatch is. Stopwatch. Yeah, a stopwatch counts up. Yeah, a stopwatch is a timepiece. Hold on. A stopwatch. Wait, hold on. No, I wanna know. Give me a moment. A stopwatch. Yeah, a stopwatch counts up. The guy later. Oh my god, this guy doesn't know. The walk cycle doesn't even know what a stopwatch is. You're like, oh, you're so stupid. You don't know what a stopwatch. You don't know what a stopwatch is, idiot. I just call walk cycle red-handed. But whatever. Anyway, anyways, debut happens. Did you know? There is a debut. We end up having a bunch of people show up with their respective fellas. They end up having a little bit of a conversation and a couple of conversations about you know, while they're there, it is rather interesting. You know, they just have the conversation. Everybody ends up getting a couple lines tactically as Walk Cycle eventually goes like, yo, let's give a debut, until eventually the guy shows up at the end of it, being like, super cool fella, basketball gamer, and then apparently 8 people are up for debut, and those fellas are up for a debut. what do I think? I think that, yes, okay, they do get a couple of lines, right, each in the locale itself. However, especially when you're not 100% sure of the debut, you're not focusing as much on it. So I would still have done one of those classic debut things. I know that it's generic, I know, but like, it's good. It's a good way to quickly show off the characters, right? Who do I want to join? iPad. I think iPad's cool. I think iPad's really cool. Getting a more technological fella in there when there currently isn't one would be very solid. They have an interesting text-to-speech voice that makes it different, and I would absolutely vote for them to be in the game, and I hope they join. But other than that, I don't really know who will. In general, I'm so absolutely against this like new screens with like, I understand that we gotta put the recommended characters in there. However, like, here's the deal: in the other outro, right, you can tell that it's not made properly, because in the other outro, right, the static comes in as the cube is arriving, right, as the Monsieur cube is arriving, and then as soon as it covers up the whole screen, the static erupts everything. That makes sense. But here doesn't, and then the music glitches out in chord. But here doesn't make any sense, because the static just kind of happens, right? Because then we're using the same music, but there's nothing here to add that actually takes over anything. So it just happens for the sake of happening, right? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So like, I still think that the outro hasn't been adapted. Anyways, why am I talking this much? Have you noticed how much I've talked about? Hold on, stop. Episode 7, watch out for the beam. Let's go. Okay, so that is episode 7 of Web. Watch out for the beam. So we start off with the fellas, hanging about with the... Okay, hold on. How about this? Let's actually talk about the intro for a moment. I don't know why. It just never comes to me to actually talk about the intros. For Web, but I think the most interesting part about them is just that they use Mario music. They use some very interesting remixes of Mario music. I think it was Slider originally, and I don't even know what is it currently. I don't remember the name, but either way, it's a song. But like, basically, they're just interested in, random events from prior episodes, mildly edited to fit in for the intro, end up happening, which I mean, it's pretty cool. I like it. It's a pretty swag way to do an intro for sure. And even though it doesn't really I feel like it doesn't really thematically fit the show that well, because of course stuff about like Mario style music is that it's very over the top happy. This show is not that over the top happy, right? Like, nobody is that joyous in this show. In fact, the majority of the people are quite miserable. However, then they're doing that. Earthquake makes their courthouse fall. The alliance, which actually ends up forming here. The alliance, their official alliance, because Candy wants to, get into it, and of course they make Yogurt do it. Yogurt not too sure, but of course then Yogurt decides to do it. I don't really know how to describe this dynamic. The best way that I can describe it is Candy is extremely forward. It's kind of like extremely forward with an extremely skeptical person that, however, kind of wants to make Candy happy, so they'll just go along with it, right? Like, they'll be like, oh, hey, maybe we shouldn't, and then they proceed to do it anyways. That's like the best way that I could describe what dynamic this even is. But yeah. Anyways, the news are there. Cole wants to switch it back to the whatever. No more Cole. I have officially banned myself from talking about Cole. It is time for Wall Cycle 2 to debut. We end up having a debut song, which I love because it's way more high effort than the elimination time theme. It's got a song. Yo, how does this go? Hold up. Wait. Your fates are decided from votes we employ. Who will stay and who will join? Let's go, bars. But yes, out of the 397, I think it's only gone up, by the way, the amount of votes. This show is on the rise. This show is going out, bow, 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 meow, all the way to the top. And it turns out that afterwards, with 100 votes, we end up having iPad join. Good job. Yes, indeed. You got to be fair, right? Well, I did think that iPad was the coolest. They do also stand out as the person with the most lines out of the people that stood around. right? Like out of the people that stood around earlier, iPad was the one who at least spoke the most, interesting lines, right? So this kind of stands out as maybe, I don't know, and I don't think that iPad probably would have joined if they had done a debut screen. However, they didn't, so iPad also gets to survive. And it was quite enjoyable. They take a lack token, which they try to eat, but of course they can't because they are mechanical mind, as some people may say. People to be like, oh no, BFDIE was robbed. Yes, exactly. In the comments right below. No, not here. No, right here. Not here. Write it in the comments of Web 7. But either way, they end up apparently surviving because they end up begging over. Walk Cycle is surprising. Like, Walk Cycle is a criticism ignorer to a very minor extent, right? Like, Walk Cycle is that type of person who like really does believe that the ideas that they're putting forth on the table and what they are saying is how things should be done. However, at the same time, they're very how to solve, like their mentality is very much so, to solve a burden, I must solve the burden, right? Which means that they don't ignore a burden to solve it, they solve the burden by dealing with it, right? Which means that despite the fact that they think that their methods are the best, because of that the way of dealing with burdens, they end up giving people what they want, like a majority of the time, which makes Walk Cycle seem nice, even though I don't think they're that nice, right? But like, either way, we end up having the iPad arrive. Nobody really understands what iPad is because they call themselves a marvel of boundless potential, transcending the constraints of mere silicon and circuits, whatever the hell. You don't know. You talk for like 50 minutes. But yes, cards are not meant to build houses. True. Technically, although again, a card house isn't really a house, it's missing 3 of the walls. It's only a house if you look at it from the 2D perspective. But so, you know, I do have to agree with the iPad on that. But yeah, they just end up leaving, and then we end up going over to the challenge. Interesting enough, I'm surprised that nobody made a fuss about iPad being here, in the sense where it's like, you notice that people thought no trespassers, right? Like, nobody ever actually, like, there was no announcement that iPad joined the game, right, from the debut. I mean, I think the presumption is that they wanted to. Also, iPad didn't even want to go here. iPad was like, no, I don't want to or play with these people. Okay, bro. I mean, maybe I guess they don't like the cast. Fair, valid. But yes, they end up having the chance to be obstacle course as web. As web. I'm calling the host web now. It's so over. As Walk Cycle ends up going along, they end up making an obstacle course, aka the obstacle is each other, because the challenge is a balance beam challenge. Super original, you know. When you think of Walk Cycle, you just think of original challenges. You know, they're all just so good. I honestly, I might be starting to agree with Pluggy here on this one. The fellas complain, but yeah, you can't really complain with what the friggin' Yogurt says, because yes, is the only thing that was written on the paper was obstacle course, but to be fair, obstacle course is not what the challenge is. So they're both wrong. So that's great. Love a 0 for 2. That's exactly what we want out here. Anyways, we end up having, well, of course, the balance being cold doesn't really want to do much. We end up having Jug decide to go over. In the meantime, the iPad's updating, so we need to hope that the iPad doesn't, get pushed off in the meantime. Jug wants to throw off Candy. For some reason, throws Candy behind him in what is one of the tactically dumbest moves I think I've ever seen. Either way, by the way, it still doesn't make any sense because Candy manages to latch onto the bottom of the pole. What type of physics is this? None of those physics make any sense. What? How did you latch onto the bottom? That is not how that works. I'm gonna be for real. You might hear background noise, by the way, but that is not how that works. You don't latch onto the bottom. What? Okay. well, that's interesting. But anyways, yeah. So while we latch on the bottom, but yeah, eventually we have to also push off the freaking yogurt spider. However, you're a spider, which means that you get to latch onto the bottom. You see, you make sense. And they end up at the very last second trying a couple of late pushes, but unfortunately, after a quick swing, BFDI 1A style. Remember, who did that? Was it Blocky? Proceeds to yeet off the one, the only Jug, who has officially fallen into the water. The combination of liquids on there has now increased exponentially. Dude, this liquid is about to become radioactive. I don't even know. This liquid's about to explode. I don't know how long Jug's making it out alive. In the meantime, Cole, for some reason, just wants the freaking iPad to wake up. He's gonna wake up. It says update. You can't read now, can you? Yeah, you can't do any. I've forbidden myself to talk about Cole. I already broke my vow. I broke my vow of silence, as Rose said in the latest BFDIE. Oh, well, as Rose didn't say in the BFDIE. I broke my vow of silence of complaining about Cole. But yeah, so in the meantime, we have like the Candy getting helped up by the fella, because of course Alliance power. Cole keeps telling them to wake up. I don't know, why are you so worried? Probably so worried about iPad. Cole, I thought you didn't give a shit. But anyways, the laser beam activating. Cole manages to somehow expertly dodge this. The laser beam ends up getting chopped off in half by the laser. The balance beam gets chopped off in half by the laser beam. But thankfully, right as it's about to fall, we end up having Mr. Pluggy ended up holding it together so that way the other two can get over there. Eventually, at the last second, we end up having Candy just get yeeted super fast by Candy gets yeeted super fast by iPad. Cole be like, that's mean, you can't do that. Whatever. The dumb character things that be like, me, you can't be mean. But either way, we end up having apparently it is they're programming to win, so they will go over. The balance beam at this point is split 4 million ways. Yogurt is severely hurt by getting a piece of the laser beam there. They're trying to win desperately. I will just point out, when that balance beam was falling, Cole did go into the water. It bounced back out, but like Cole did get dunked by water, so they probably should have been out there already. But either way, they end up being out because iPad accidentally drops onto them. Candy is very worried about Yogurt, but they seem to apparently be okay. I think that these fellas are not too happy about iPad. iPad's not going to make it for the long haul, I think. But either way, we get to vote to save. Who's getting saved? I don't know, man. Is it Cole's time to go? I feel like it's Cole's time to go. But like people are gonna find it cute or whatever. I'm gonna say Pluggy didn't do the challenge, so I have to say Pluggy. Okay, let's say Pluggy. I don't know. I think I'm wrong, but I'm gonna say Pluggy. I feel like my predictions has been alternating between two people, but I have to say Pluggy, right? Because Candy does the challenge, Jug does the challenge, and Cole does the challenge, and then Pluggy doesn't do the challenge. But they could get saved because of that, but I'm gonna see that Pluggy gets out, okay? In this case, I don't really have too much of a reasoning over them. They don't do a challenge. They do help out, of course, in that one scene, but I see the other three getting enough votes that maybe it doesn't really matter. I don't know if that makes sense, but if it doesn't make sense, it should, because that's what I'm going with. Alright, and then in the last scene, we end up having the fellas playing cards, of course, the 1 and the 7s, and then the corn dodgers end up freaking pointing a flamethrower at them, being like, show the 7s. Valid tactic. I think more people should employ it. Alright, anyways, it is time for web number 8. The 8th episode of web is titled Jump Ship. Let's jump it. Go! Okay, so that is episode 8 of Web Jump Ship, and damn, this show's pretty good. But there's been a couple of times where I just had to sit here and go like, yo, did you know that this show is a good show? But this is another one of those times where it's like, I just watch an episode, right? And at the end of the episode, I'm like, wow, I barely have anything negative to say about it. That was just a fun video. And it really is. I don't know what's going to happen, because I noticed that this episode is 10 months old, and Web.90, which proceeds to release, is 8 days old. So that means that something major happened. However, for, of course, the risk that Web9 ends up being, this is, at least in the moment, definitely a very, very solid thing. Because of, again, it's just an incredible level of polishness, right? You can tell that the writing is high quality. It's coming up with challenges of different situations, right? Either putting it in different spots. There's different thematics. The main plot usually involves different people than the other time, right? The dialogue is relatively well written. We end up doing one of the things which I like that this show's doing is it's doing a lot of variance in terms of like who's interacting with who. So it's not just locking people down into the same duos as well, right? It's building up its lore, which like it keeps itself very ambiguous, but at the same time very simplistic, so you can understand it. And like in general, it's doing all of that stuff pretty damn well. I must admit, it is doing a good job at it, and this is another episode that I think majorly shows that off, right? Yeah, we have ourselves the classic little intro, and then we have ourselves the idea. So, of course, there needs to be an alliance to counteract the alliance. Jug decides that iPad is scary and should not be our enemy. So, therefore, we end up trying to solve. So we end up going over to ask iPad for an alliance. iPad, which, by the way, is still glitching out from the water damage. So that means that everybody on this theoretical alliance is damaged. Cole is damaged, Jug is damaged, and the iPad is damaged. Everybody's damaged. There's damage everywhere. So they end up rejecting, because it turns out that actually iPad's mission statement, which we did not know from the last episode, actually from like when they debuted, we did not know about this, but now we know, is that iPad's mission statement is that they have to prove that artificial intelligence or robots are better than than humankind, all right, than object kind. I mean, humankind isn't a thing. Than like living beings, right? They have to prove that they're better, and they will only cooperate with fellow robots rather than people. So then Jug decides to go, we are robots. So they end up actually having a captcha to solve. If you can solve the captcha with no mistakes, you will do it. You end up having Cole answer the captcha wrong, which is actually correct, because obviously a captcha is meant to prove that you are not a robot, right? So that means that if you're trying to prove that you are a robot, you would do it wrong. So therefore, since Cole answers the thing that robots can't solve, you end up being correct. You see, that's smart. And again, look, here's the deal. Dude, I've been really curious at how difficult it is to make iPad's voice. That is something that I'm extremely curious about, because the amount of glitching that the iPad voice does is really interesting. You know, like, this is the type of thing where it's like, I think, despite, of course, being a completely useless person when it comes to the actual production of a show. I can't do any of the sectors except like voice acting. So other than that, I still think I have, a rough idea of what's complicated, what's not complicated, because you can just kind of tell, right? Based on like how much shows do it, right? Like if a show does it, it's complicated. If a show doesn't do it, I know if a show does it, it doesn't tend to be as complicated. If a show doesn't do it, and like considering how iPad glitches out literally constantly, like it sounds like the type of thing that would be really annoying to make, but it's probably not, because it happens constantly, right? So like, I mean, I don't really know, but it's an interesting hypothetical here. And either way, alliance to make, there will be consequences if you're not a robot. Basically, even then, I don't know, this show's animation, like, while I haven't ever complained about it, I do think that it's getting better, because camera angles are happening. Notice this episode how many camera angles it's got, where from like the top, where from like the iPad view of like Cole and Jug, so you get to see them kind of top down. Like, I think it's, like, there's a lot of cool angles going on, which other episodes don't have. And again, I'm interested to see if episode 9 is also going to ramp up in this aspect as well, because it could. And anyways, Yogurt is going to talk to Candy. However, unfortunately, the eliminations are being done speedrunning, because the news has said that over 100 cops, the largest search in history, will be going over into the grasslands to search for Walk Cycle. So Walk Cycle is trying to rush it. It turns out the eliminated contestant with 80 votes is Candy, getting 19 less than freaking Pluggy over here. Pretty random elimination, I must admit. I mean, I guess Candy didn't do that much in the episode. I think I might have overestimated how many people like Candy as a contestant. I feel like if you get reminded of Candy a lot, you'll kind of like Candy, because Candy's very attitude character, so in a vote to save ends up performing pretty well. However, in the last challenge, they ended up kind of being stuck to nothing, really. Like, the two things they attempted got them nearly yeeted out immediately. The first one didn't, the second one did, so there wasn't really that much for Candy to even do, but yes, it's unfortunate. Candy ends up getting deleted very immediately, and it turns out that, oh yeah, by the way, wait a minute. Yeah, Walk Cycle talks about Chrome. I won't let Chrome ruin everything. I don't know who Chrome is, and of course nobody knows who Chrome is. I do have to admit, obviously the first thing I think about when they say Chrome is Google Chrome. That is that is the first thing I think. So, we might have, so that means that episode 9 is a confirmed collab with Google's diplomatic show. No, I'm joking. But, like, it's interesting. Either way, Chrome is the enemy of Walk Cycle. I mean, you can say it's the enemy, but, of course, Walk Cycle is the enemy of the show. So, in a way, maybe we're rooting for Chrome, whoever the hell this is. But, they end up moving and getting the fellas off. I don't know why Walk Cycle makes them need to want to move, as if they can't just teleport them out of the way. But anyways, they get them over to the beach where the current debut contestants are, the failed debutantes, and then we end up having the challenge, which is to get to the island, the small island. We end up having Pluggy eventually get strapped down to the boat so that they can't, I guess, just fly over, and then Walk Cycle proceeds to speed run away while the police are searching. So, yeah, the quote-unquote alliance ends up building itself over into a boat. However, accidentally, Cole doesn't walk in time, and because a distracted Yogurt ends up being there instead. So we end up having that. And that means that, well, the stuck Pluggy and Cole proceed to go over there themselves. So what ends up proceeding to happen? Oh yeah, the debutantes end up piling up on Corn Dog, which obviously has a motor because it's freaking Corn Dog, okay? I don't... It's Corn Dog, okay? It's Corn Dog from Gaza. What do you think? And they proceed to get there first. There is an incredible irony to the fact that the people who did the challenge first are the people who aren't in the show. The people who aren't in the show are better than the people who are in the show. This is objectively true now. So, that's kind of hilarious. But either way, we end up having, a little bit of a conversation between Yogurt and Jug, which of course historically did pretty bad, ended up being on pretty bad terms. And it turns out that apparently Jug, and of course Yogurt was thinking about Candy because they didn't get to say what they wanted to say to Candy. And Jug said, come on, Candy. Like, wasn't Candy a little bit overbearing? Wasn't Candy, like, making you do what you didn't want to do? And Yogurt was like, yeah, I mean, I did feel like that, especially in the last challenge. However, I didn't get to say it, and I wanted to say it so that we could at least, be on good terms. But they weren't on good terms. So yeah, but I'm glad that, like, there's a bit of an agreement there. Especially because, they did the whole cross-teaming, whatever, and they caused a massive drama between them. But now that seems to be relatively mended. Dude, Yogurt, I didn't even notice how many different angles of Yogurt there are in this episode until I'm skimming it right now. Like, holy shit. So yeah, they're doing that debate, but overall have a half-decent situation. While iPad is, of course, talking out the other team. And then it turns out that Cole and Pluggy are doing their situation. Cole is asking questions to various degrees of smartness. Where are all the fish? I like them. Or, well, of course, as Cole would say, where are all the fish? I like them. Yeah, like that. That's how Cole would say it. Dude, I feel like I must have missed, because like in episode 4 I really called out Cole, but I feel like now that I'm looking at Cole being consistently like this, I think I might have just fucked up. Like, I could have just misinterpreted Cole in episodes 1 and 2. I still don't think Cole was like this. Like, Cole felt way more active in their knowledge of things, right? Because, like, again, this is a call, like, because here's the deal. Maybe I'm wrong, but how I was imagining call was a don't care, but with knowledge, right? That it's like, oh, I have to do this. No, instead, this call is more of doesn't really know much, right? And therefore doesn't want to do anything because they're unaware of it, right? They're unaware of anything. But anyways, Pluggy really wants Cole to not talk, but they proceed to talk randomly until Pluggy ends up telling them to shut up after asking them what their favorite color. And then Cole gets sad, saying that they're mean. And then Pluggy proceeds to, have a relatively unreasonable crash out and competing in a terribly manly game show with a murderer hosted by a murderer. And I'm stuck. Wait, with a murderer? Who's the wait? Oh yeah, iPad. I mean, they didn't murder anybody, but anyways, hosted by a murderer, and I'm stuck on a boat with a moron who can't stop speaking their mind for 5 seconds. And then Cole gets upset and decides that they're going to go swimming because they want to go to swim with the fish where people are chilling. And then Pluggy proceeds to get to try to apologize last second, but yeah, no, Cole goes in the water. I'm confused. How did the boat stop running? Wait a minute. I'm confused. How does the boat work? Because, my presumption was that the boat would just continue with Pluggy on it, right? And then the problem would be that Pluggy would get to the end, but wait, how did the boat stop? Huh? Who's running? I guess I don't know how the boat is running. But, Cole didn't turn off the boat. That is one thing I'm sure Cole didn't do. That is not, Cole, there's no way Cole is the reason to turn off the boat. I don't know. But anyway, then they proceed to have Cole eventually swim over. And then as they swim over, it turns out that what even happens? Oh yeah, Cole ends up having their chunk piece, right? The one on the left, the one on the right, detach, right? That includes their right arm, and they end up passing out. Right, then I'm sinking off to the depths, and Pluggy starts to realize the extent of their actions. Then no, Cole's for real. If you don't mess with Cole, okay, Cole is for real. So that's not good. So then they end up barely managing to break out of there, which, I'm lucky, I guess lucky that it wasn't attached to the engine itself, but we managed to lift off Cole at the very end without the chunk piece that got divided. So now Cole just has one eye as well. So them and Jug, I guess, are united now, but they end up having a lot of pain. They end up, why were you mean to me? But yeah, they end up apologizing eventually. That, yeah, they'll let their anger out in a different way. Which is fair. I feel like Pluggy's way of approaching the game, it's definitely like an unmanaged anger for a situation, right? Because you can really tell, a lot of, nearly everything that Pluggy complains about is not actually that bad, right? The majority of these challenges are not actually that bad. In fact, Pluggy would even win them, right? But it's just that thing where it's you're in a bad situation, you're in a bad situation, so things just feel like they're wrong all the time. It's just bad, even when something isn't even that bad, right? That's kind of the situation that you end up putting ourselves in, which is, it's definitely unfortunate, for them here, but there's a lot of reasonability, but I guess not too many as well. iPad tries to sabotage the other team by shooting one of their laser beams, but it turns out that the glitch also let their laser beam stop, which means that they end up losing the challenge of being up for elimination, and they end up absolutely crying out over it, because it's I have to prove that the AI is better than, not AI. So, I'm a fail. I'm a failure, right? And Jug ends up, I guess, awkwardly comforting them, because, I'm pretty sure we disagree with the mission statement, but, stuff is quite good. We end up having Pluggy end up being Cole's not really that annoying. Look, Pluggy. You can find Cole annoying. It's you can find Cole annoying. You don't gotta lie. If you find Cole annoying, which you very clearly do, right? Like, you find Cole quite damn annoying, you know? Like, you don't want to lie about it. Like, it's okay. You can deal with it better. You know, you can deal with somebody you find annoying, but you can still find him annoying. Who's getting out? I feel like it has to be iPad, right? I mean, they do have the comfort scene at the last episode, but I just don't see Jug or Yogurt getting out here. So I'm gonna say iPad, also because debuters never win or whatever. So I'm gonna go with that. Okay, hopefully I can do this today. Please tell me I can do this today. Episode 9A is titled Dilemma. Let's go. Let's hope I don't fail. It was released 8 days ago. Let's get there. Okay, so it is very late. However, I still think that I'm going to drop by my coverage of Web.90 here because, you know, I just watched it and I mean that wow. That is I don't know what the best word to describe that video is, but I think that, like, I was definitely a bit worried heading into this episode because it was 10 months. It was 10 months that passed, right? Which means that one of the best parts of web, right, to in the past few episodes was how in general consistent it is, right? Because as shows start and people get better, right, we end up having this constant, like, switch up, right, that shows end up doing. And while at the end of the day, yeah, I mean, it's cool that shows improve, right, it hurts the general experience, right, because, like, on average, it doesn't feel like you're watching the same show part way through. It feels like the show evolves, and sometimes you don't really want it to. You know, sometimes you just want to watch it, especially here. You want, like, the experience that you can expect, right? Like, just to give, you know, a topical example, right? Concept, you know, starts off so much different than Concept is right now. So looking at Web, that overall kept itself relatively consistent all those first 8 episodes. I was worried that with this gap, it was going to be significantly different. Is it? Well, yes. In looks, okay. In animation, it does look different. What is my most immediate example? Trees. Look at the trees. You can tell that the detail of the trees. Like, it's very much so more detailed. In a way where it's like, it's not that we couldn't have done trees like this earlier. I mean, like, it would have taken more time, but at the end of the day, like, it's a stylistic decision more than anything. And also, like, in general, mouths and eyes end up being a little bit more varied. I think there's the main deal is that there is a bigger focus on stuff like eyebrows than there was before. But, like, in general, it's fine because it's better, right? That's how it goes. And in terms of course, the writing of this episode, okay, like, it takes itself, like, the animation at the end of the day is improved, right? It's improved, but I think it still manages to keep enough of the general stylistic essence to where after, like, about 2 minutes I didn't really mind anymore. Well, pulling off many camera angles because of the nature of this challenge. It pulls off many different environments as well, lightings as well, with caves and the sun shining at the beach and everything, right? In terms of audio, we have musical montages as well. We have various things like that. Audio is all very solid. And, like, dude, I don't know. I think the best way that I can define this is, no, yeah, I have to be 100% honest when I say it. When I find something like this, I have to absolutely say it. Web.90 is excellent. Good job. Good job. Web.90 is excellent. So what happens in this episode? We end up having, well, first of all, a bunch of cops chatting and one of the cops, a new cop, ended up going like, hey, what if it was in one of the previously gone locations of this fella, right, of Walk Cycle? And in the meantime, we end up having the old police officer, the Shield, going like, you think you got a better plan than me, eh? Well, I am actually a cop from 1,000,000 years ago, but back in the first act with the fella who died. So, that is, yeah. Then we end up having the elimination. Actually, no. Yeah, that's true. We actually end up having the little section of the box and they're dropping down in the post-credit scene last time. And we end up having Jug and Yogurt to drop in. I think one of the most interesting things that happens here right before they enter is you'll notice the same exact thing happens with the dynamic of Jug and freaking Yogurt than the dynamic of Candy and the yogurt, right? You'll notice these are two very, very similar dynamics, right? Like, anytime Candy wanted to do something a little bit nefarious, what did Candy do? Candy was like, hey, Yogurt, help me out in this challenge. And it's like, oh, but your team won't notice. Come on, let's go. Right after Yogurt says, like, oh, I'm not too sure about this, right? Like, you'll notice there's always the dynamics that Yogurt even just likes, right? Because you'll notice how Yogurt liked the dynamic a bunch, right, is that at the end of the day, you end up having, like, a character that dictates the play, right, that's here to make the decision, right, because we end up having Yogurt be sort of, at the end of the day, a bit of a survivalist, right, doesn't want to do danger, wants to stick by the rules, but then having this, a bit more outlawy character to kind of drive along with them ends up being this build that ends up happening here. And you'll notice, like, whether it's with Jug and Yogurt, that is the same thing as being like, at the end of the day, Yogurt is somebody that acts very good following a leader instruction, but they've never really led themselves, right? And in the same, for example, the same thing applies to the last episode, right? In the last episode, Yogurt isn't processing it properly, and it requires Jug to go out here and say it properly, right? And talk and, like, give them, I guess, sort of tell them what to think for them to think it, right? So I think that this one interaction, I think it really shows off how, like, at the end of the day, it wasn't just a Candy thing. It's more of a Yogurt thing than it is a Candy thing. Being, like, willing to just follow somebody which they consider friends, like, look, because they think their friends would make a good decision. Anyways, they enter the building, and they end up discovering a couple of things. They end up discovering, of course, this is all freaking Walk Cycle stuff, including a couple of books, for example, books on hosting, a books on game shows, a book on Earth and Nature, right, a bunch of understanding, right, so in trophies where people are removed, the contestants are ranked based on their place in the game, right, in general, they're just kind of doing their whole shenanigans. Isn't there something about hosts here? Hold on. Hosts are one of the most important. Okay, no, yeah, this is all fair. It's not like there's no bullshit text randomly written on there. And then they seem to find a bath bomb character, number 578, who is certainly dead as one of the experiments hidden away by a bunch of bookshelves. They end up scrolling down a list where they end up finding a lot of characters. There, I like how one of them just called Alex. There's just a bunch of objects and an Alex. Okay. But as they end up doing that, they end up finding that they all seem to be experiments of potential characters that Walk Cycle made up. Then Walk Cycle ends up TPing them all away as Walk Cycle proceeds to do the elimination. iPad is still sad because of the prior situation. We end up having the bleachers, which aren't great. Cole specifically states that they don't really like it, but yeah, fine. They proceed to agree. And they proceed to bring over the bleachers with one of the police officers, that main police officer guy, until they then end up getting firmly squished and die by the other bleachers. And in the meantime, we end up having a scene of a mostly cracked tracker there. If that's shown on screen, that means it's important, right? The classic rule, you wouldn't show something for no reason, so that means that they're important. Maybe they will get a signal from that tracker before, especially as the new police officer was told to hear it. So something like that might be happening. 536 votes. Is that the... Okay, hold on. I haven't counted exactly, but I believe of this, because if this is true, it might be the only show I think I've ever seen an object counter to do this. The only show to achieve a higher number of votes from every single episode to another. It has only increased. I don't think the voting count ever went down, because it went from like 12 to 123 to like 230 to 250 to 300 to 400 out of 500. Like, it is only increasing. The votes of web have never gone down, which I believe is one of the most impressive parts about it, I guess. You can tell that, like, I think this is a reward. You know, I'm gonna say, I believe that this is considered that this is a reward for a show that's doing good effort, right? Like, because it's not a show, like, you notice, it's not a show that people watch and then drop off from. It's a show that people watch and get into, right? Because that means that people are watching new episodes and they're telling other people, right? The show is growing as a show because of other work. And I mean, after watching the other episodes of Web, I couldn't deny with any of that logic, right? Like this stuff is good. This stuff is good. I have to admit it. This show is absolutely one of the most consistently solid that I have seen. All 9 of these episodes are pretty quality. You know, they're all pretty quality. And it's all very good stuff. The eliminated contestant ends up being actually a yogurt, which I didn't expect at all. 156 votes over which is less than iPad's 180. I guess it's one of those things where it's like yogurt didn't technically do anything. They just, like, Jug did the comforting, right? So as the comforted, I guess there's not that many votes to share. Even then, this still ends up relatively even. It was a good voting. It was a good voting split. But yeah, iPad's cry at the end was a very good tactic when it comes to getting rid of them. Yogurt is now super, of course, anxious because they saw the dead body. It's like, yo, what the hell happened to me? Walk Psycho tries to walk away, haha. And then the eliminated, the debut contestants end up telling them, yo, what the fuck are you doing? Eliminate them. And then they proceed to extremely reluctantly eliminate them, which is really interesting. It's the only time that Walk Psycho has been, visibly not wanting to eliminate somebody. Like, as far as things that they are willing to do, that is the one thing that, like, they haven't minded doing, right? Like, they will eliminate somebody. It doesn't matter. So, very interesting. But yeah, they're very reluctant to do so. I'm not exactly sure why. I mean, like, there wasn't, no, I don't, this doesn't make sense, at least in the sense of, like, what we have seen so far, right? Like, I don't think in the other episodes there's any displayed favoritism towards towards yogurt from Walk Cycle. So there's no like, for example, again, I'm going to bring out the concept example because it's interesting, right? Like, before you end up having the sad elimination where Mishmash eliminates the tape, right? There's a couple of episodes where you notice that there's favoritism, right, from Mishmash towards the tape as considered a friend. But here, Walk Cycle is upset about it, but it doesn't see, but, like, I don't believe that these two necessarily had a rapport ever before. That rhymed, let's go. But, yeah, so I'm not exactly sure what's up with that, but, either way, we end up having ourselves a challenge, which is to get something shiny. Yes, get anything shiny, proceed to go. It turns out that, yes, they consider a bomb a difficult name for a stopwatch. By the way, that's a timer goes down, a stopwatch goes up. A stopwatch counts how much time has passed. A timer counts how much time is left. So if a timer is going down, that's a timer. If it's counting time, it's going up. Okay? Like, let's use words properly out here. But either way, Cole ends up rejecting Jug and proceeding to go over to their newfound epic friend, freaking Pluggy, and Jug ends up getting mildly hit by this, and they end up going alone. They don't want to help. They don't want to be with iPad because they end up going. They don't want to not go into an alliance. iPad decided they work better alone, anyways. They proceed to go over. I'm going to be quite surprised, considering iPad, tends to be relatively smart. Find something shiny. I mean, like, turn on the flashlight. You're an iPad, no? That's the most immediate, that's like the first idea I thought of. Like, you are an iPad, like, turn your screen to full brightness, and then boom, that is something shiny. At the end of the day, like, you, right? If you're shiny, same thing goes. Like, technically tinfoil, right? Like, at the end of the day, you could submit tinfoil. Like, there's something that's vaguely shiny, like, again, no rule stated that you can't, right? And I mean, we just saw this guy make like, Wall Cycle is kind of weird, and then eventually, speaking of which, the debut contestants agree that, yo, we're gonna team up with the contestants, all right? Sound good? Wall Cycle goes like, yeah, sure. And then they proceed to do that, and then BFDIE ends up going over and being like, yo, isn't it kind of weird how, they end up doing a negativity thing because they seem the basketball absolutely hits them, being like, oh, you seem to have a weird susceptibility to peer pressure, which, yeah, is true. And then they end up having a therapy session, which I'm not even gonna lie, when this chair dropped by, that is the funniest thing I think of. I laughed. I laughed pretty hard, and and I should not have done that because it was late, but I did do that. It was really, really funny. So, okay, I guess I'll just cover this all in one go. So, we end up having basketball end up being proper going in. Basketball, you can tell that this guy, he studied some psychology before, because he has to steal wallets, he has to manipulate people, so he studied psychology before. But anyways, they end up agreeing to the peer pressure because you let your contestant dictate your challenge. You haven't let us out of that cave, bro. Why do you let the people you're so easily in control of take control? What a quote. What a quote. That's a quote for the age, and it's from fucking the YouTuber. What is this show? Ain't no way that you're telling me that the YouTuber who robs Wallace just said that quote. Like, nah. That's incorrect characterization. Has to be. But yeah, I mean, it is an excellent question, and I mean, one of the most interesting things about it is that, again, in the same way that I found it really interesting how the blender jug dynamic is the same as before, despite directly mentioning itself, this is the exact same thing. Walk Cycle has all of the control in the world right now. However, they are letting BFDIE take control of the situation and conduct this therapy session. And BFDIE knows that if you just pressure Walk Cycle enough, you can let him do what you want. Therefore, by just pressuring them, forcing them into this therapy session, Walk Cycle isn't going to leave. And I think that is one of the most interesting things, right? Is that you can tell that BFDIE is confident about it because of that. Because they're using despite talking about peer pressure, they are directly invoking it. They're invoking the problem that Walk Cycle has to talk about the problem. It's really interesting. And anyways, Walk Cycle here proceeds with a very random, analogy, okay? Well, very random to us. An analogy for something that they can't tell you, okay? So, homeless person. Alright? I have to talk about it. Homeless person called John. Okay, John drops by. And apparently, for no reason, they have to evict a couple of people. I don't know who exactly those people are. I will admit that one of them looks like a plug, but I don't think that the shape of the people in the example have anything to do with it. They have to evict a couple people to get a cool, shiny new mansion. These people, they mean something to this person. So they don't say friends. That is not a specific thing that gets said. They just said acquainted, okay? So you could evict them and live in the mansion alone, or he chooses not to evict the people, but then he goes back to being homeless. So this is a moral dilemma. Indeed it is. And BFDIE suggests a third option being, hey, we can, there doesn't technically have, okay, here's the deal. In a moral dilemma, obviously you have to choose one or the other for the sake of choosing one or the other, right? Where you can do the opinion. Where it's like, hey, those people who would get evicted wouldn't necessarily be out of a job, right? And they wouldn't necessarily be out of a life, so they could get a house. So therefore, you can go in a mansion, and eventually they can go rent out a different apartment, for example, and it'll be good, right? That idea. It'll be frustrating, but there will be a degree of understanding. Or you could say that, hey, if we're making 6 people homeless for the sake of one person, then that's not good, right? Those are the simple two ways to think about the moral dilemma, right? However, yeah, BFDIE suggests the idea is that, if Walk Cycle, which I think is what Walk Cycle is performing here, if Walk Cycle proceeds to correlate this moral dilemma to an example of what the situation for Walk Cycle actually is, which I have no idea how this correlates to anything. I mean, Walk Cycle being an all-powerful being would directly contradict the idea of being homeless, right? So, I don't know how this example correlates to Walk Cycle's life, but it has to, right? But either way, yeah, you could come up with the third example, come up with a compromise. In real life, you can come up with compromises, right? You can come up with, for example, living all together. If we're acquainted and everybody's okay with it, yeah, sure, right? And then it'd be one of those things where it's like, well, maybe 5 people and then one person has to get evicted. Well, that's their loss, right? At the end of the day, they didn't agree to, right? Or you can, for example, with this multi-million-dollar mansion, you can maybe have money and then you can give it to some other person, right? Same thing goes, maybe one of the houses can go to another, but rent out a hotel. There's so many ideas, right? But yeah, it's really, really, really intriguing. But yeah, they proceed to Basketball, he says they're friends, aren't they? And they proceed to leave. But yeah, that's interesting. Anyways, how's the challenge going? Dude, the challenge is happening. The challenge is certainly happening. Dude. I feel like, how long have I been talking about this episode already? I feel like I've been talking about this episode for 1,000,000 years. In fact, I have. But either way, we end up having various people cut out the challenge. Okay, let me try to remember this off the top of my head, because of course the way that this episode is paced, it's again very solid. I believe that again the writing of the episode is excellent. It really is really good. This is really good. This does the types of tactics as having different people in different situations, but then you constantly switch from one to the other, and you see one situation is more serious, one situation is more or less for real, so that way you can switch the tone super easy. Like you have like this show, because the way that this episode is written, it just has so much control of itself, right? In a way, since we're doing this whole analogy of control, you can see how in control this show is with its writing, right? But you might think, here's the deal. You might think that is really dumb to say. Why? Because it's well, obviously the show's in control of its writing. The writer wrote it. But yes. But at the same time, no. An episode isn't necessarily, just because you've written an episode doesn't mean that you were in control of how the episode was being written, because you have to do the certain ideas that you want. You have to invoke everything that you need to do for the episode, right? Which means that certain things are whack, I've heard so many show creators talk about, their episodes being too long, or having a challenge, or creativity and all that stuff, right? So that means that, it is possible to have a writing that you're not in control of. However, this is an example of writing that is extremely in control, right? You get it's super tactical, because you have because it's, again, in just like web in general, right? Which is one of the things that I said back in the first few episodes of web. One of the best things that this show does is it just sets itself up really well. It gives itself a winning hand, with a blackjack analogy, right? It gives itself a winning hand. How does it give itself a winning hand here? Well, it's not gonna get stuck with a boring pacing, or getting monotone, or getting too serious or too fun. Why? Because what does it do with this challenge? At the end of the day, it disperses everybody, right? So you can have, for example, Cole's arc is more fun, right? Because we're doing it with the corn dog and more stuff, right? And even though, they're worried that they're not doing the challenge, at the end of the day, that's for fun. Jug is more worried, because the thing that's going on with Jug, right, is that Jug is upset because of we're ditched by Cole, while we were constantly with, right? And that means that they currently don't have anybody around, because freaking Yogurt just got eliminated. Cole's not with them anymore, and they're just alone, but they think they can do it, and they have to do it. So they're doing that. So that's a more serious situation, right? iPad is a more solitude situation. They're the character that's fully alone, right? Which means that they're just kind of doing their own thing. They're more, when we properly want to just think about the challenge, we think about the iPad, right? People to remind it, okay, this is how the challenge is going. You think about iPad, right? For example. Or when you want to, a more, I guess, duo dynamic, right? Because, Jug is directly, here's the deal. Cole is in a forced duo with the contestants. Jug is rejecting a duo. So and iPad is solitude. So if you want a more duo dynamic, you go to Pluggy and Tinfoil, right? And then the other character that was also there that I forgot who it was, the water balloon, right? So those three end up forming the combined duo dynamics, and where you can do fun character interactions, right, with them, because they are actually willing to talk to each other, and that is more fun in the sense of interesting interaction, but fun related to challenge rather than fun external of challenges. But you see, and then there's also the host as well is a different thing that's going on. That is the most serious one of them, because at the end of the day, that's the one that's going to impact the rest of it. But you see, by setting itself up with all of these different locations, it can make sure that it paces the episode in a way where it locks itself into a flow state, right? The flow state is the flow state where everything is always engaged, where everything is at the right level of not too hyperactive or too confusing, or of too hyperactive and sensory overload, but not boring or confusing, basically, right? So it can make itself be in the flow state, and it achieves it. It really does. It really does achieve it. And you can tell it because like it doesn't just take this opportunity and go in a cycle, right? You can tell that it does it. Like for example, for I believe nearly the entire first half of the episode, iPad doesn't appear at all. But then in the last like 5 minutes, the iPad scenes show up like 3 times, right? Because at the first half, we're getting a batch of how the more serious things are going, right? Especially with the host, and then afterwards we get to lock in a little bit more on the challenge, right? Like you see, it does all this stuff, and it does it well. It does it really well, and I have to absolutely give it all the props for it. We end up having the music at the end. Oh, I forgot what song this is. I've definitely heard of this song before, but what is this? Music on YouTube, Community Gardens. Is this the song? I don't know if this is the song. Maybe I need to check. I'm getting a YouTube ad. God damn it! Hold on. Is this the song? No, this is the other song. Wait, is it? I'm checking. No, this is the other song. Okay, but I don't remember. I've heard it before in a show, not in an object show. I think I heard it like a different show. But either way, I've not seen it. And eventually, at the end of it, we end up having the scene to end off 9A, which it ends up being Walk Cycle looking at the elimination pencil and then dropping the elimination pencil and smiling because of it. Well, what is going on? I don't really know, but something. I believe that maybe in a way, what is going on, right, is that I think. Oh, that's a great question. What is happening? Man, that is one hell of a question. Okay, because like the way that that original section makes me think, right? That like that proper that test subject thing. It makes me think that like that acquaintances thing, right? Having a connection, as John does, as a homeless person, that we have a connection, right? What does it make me think? It makes me think that the connection is that at the end of the day, it's sort of a me phone thing, right? In a way, Ross could have a connection with the contestants that are in the show because they're made, right? They're the subjects that were created for the show, and they end up being there for the show. If that makes sense, right? However, the thing about it is that this I don't think works because these contestants have lives, right? Like there's a city and everything, and objects and people. That means that people already exist, right? I mean, they called this guy one time before, so that means that these people that are contestants, I don't think they're just contestants, right? I mean, like, I don't think they were created by the guy. I think that at the end of the day, they arrive with a degree of like existence before, but then again, the II people had the memories implanted into them, so who the fuck knows, right? But that was the original idea, right? So that's why he says, because like my analogy and why I think that there is a degree of logic to this, right, is that like if you imagine he makes a contestant, right, he's currently in a bad spot, right, and he makes a contestant because he wants to run a successful show for whatever QB is doing, right? I don't know if he's working for somebody or whatever, but either way he's doing that, right? For hosting a successful show, he's learned that's his job, okay? So that's the mansion that he's gonna win. He's win the cube or whatever, right? And then for that, however, he has to evict people he cares about, which is erasing the eliminated contestant that he built, and he ends up building an acquaintance with, right? If that makes sense. So that's the angle that I'm looking at it. However, I don't think it's correct, and if that's not correct, I don't currently have a theory. I'm just gonna be straight up with you. I don't currently know. I don't think it's something that we'd be aware of because I don't know that analogy is like that moral dilemma. Sorry, I keep saying analogy. It's not really an analogy. That moral dilemma, like, it really doesn't feel like it actually connects too much with anything that Walk Cycle is, right? Which is why I'm a bit confused about it. Like, it feels like there's something up with it, but at the same time, no, I don't know, but either way, yeah, I currently don't have a theory, and I don't want to half-ass it. The thing I came up with was that, but I think it's incorrect, but like I don't currently have a better idea. But yeah, I mean, that is Web. What do you think of Web? Just to give off, I guess, a closing statement on it because I've talked about this episode for way too long. Is that, dude, this is great. This is great. Web, I believe you can tell that it's growing. You can tell that it's doing its job. Because like at the end of the day, right? is one of those things where it's like, I think that, this position this thing that I'm doing, right, Audio Catchup, is a thing that's relatively rare, getting the proper criticism of shows, giving the proper talk about shows and all this stuff. I think that this is rare. However, I think that numbers don't lie. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think numbers lie. Numbers don't tend to lie, and at the end of the day, even though maybe there isn't another analyst out there in the world, in the object show community, that's going to tell you why web works, okay? And why web is growing. I'm here to tell you that web works, and I think that despite the fact that there isn't an analyst out there other than me, as far as I'm aware of, that's analyzing web, I do think that at the end of the day, people, subconscious or not, silently or not, or at their couches, at their homes, at their smart TVs, at their phones, have understood it by just watching it. And it grows because you tell a friend, YouTube notices that the watch time is high because the videos are good, and then it goes high. It grows. And I mean, I don't know, this video already has 10,000 views in 8 days. That's a great performance, especially considering, the average episode of Walter Except Blender. I mean, the most popular episode doesn't really have, the most popular episode is 30K, and that's episode 1, right? And then the other episode has 19K. So, for example, if you think about Web 2, right? Think about Web 2, 19,000 views, because if we consider Web 1 as, of course, first episode fluke, right? Web 2, 19K, and in this episode, 10K, right? That means, you know what that means? That means, roughly a 60%, level, 60% of the people from Web 2 have roughly gone over, 60% of the amount of people that got to Web 2 are still at Web 9. I understand this is not exactly true because certain episodes are more like Web 7 and Web 4, but at the end of the day, that implies that, these episodes have a certain degree of capability to maintain viewers and to get new viewers in because they manage to convince, right? It's the same thing that, for example, that you can see on a bigger scale in some shows as well. Like ITFT is one of the greatest shows at this. It manages to keep over 60% of 2 million viewers all the way for 10 episodes, keeping it over 1 million viewers, which is one of the most impressive set of statistics I think I've ever seen. I've not watched ITFT, but I've seen the statistic and it's insane, right? But it does it, and I do absolutely think that this is true. This is truly very good. I mean, I think that it's a little bit okay. I'm gonna be honest. It is a little bit limited by the fact that it's a 2-year-old show. That at the end of the day starts off looking very regular. Right, as I said when in my talk Web 1, it just looked like a large cast show if it was small, right? So I will be honest, okay? I am gonna be absolutely 100% for real here with you. I do believe that one of the things that I would honestly fully consider as somebody who's watched web, right? And I mean, web is good, web is great. BFPR was very cool in different ways. I do agree with this. I would say that I do think that we should consider the possibility of starting another show. I'm gonna say Web 9 quality with an episode 1 with a unique idea, right? Getting a unique concept onto a show with Web 9 quality. If the idea is intriguing, if the characters are intriguing, if that first episode is engaging, right? And then you give it Web 9 levels of writing, Web 9 levels of quality, I think that it would be a gigantic breakthrough. I really do. I think that giving Web 9 quality to an episode 1 of a show, maybe even non-competition, right? Because we've seen how well non-competition shows can do. I do truly believe that even though, again, web's good, I'm not saying cancel, I'm not saying that, web should continue, absolutely, but I do think that it should be just a thing on the mind, that I believe that there is an opportunity that an episode 1 with modern finnydalmos quality, with the modern web team performing an episode 1 to this quality, it could explode, and it could be one of the big ones. That's my say on web. Let's do an outro. Okay, I think that stands as one of the largest over discussions of an episode ever. I'm not gonna lie, I talked about Web.90 for so long, but I just had so much to say. It was one of those things where, like, when you encounter something, right? Sorry, I had to cut off because of Audacity crash. But like when you encounter something that you just really think is special. Like I really watched Web 9. I was like, this is something. This is the build up of what I'm already watching. What I thought was a really good show, and it's building up. And then after 10 months, it releases an excellent episode. I have to talk about this with the full degree of analysis that it deserves, regardless of it being 1 in the morning, regardless of anything. I had to talk about it. So yeah, absolutely. I don't know who's listening to this outro. I don't know how much people care. But look, all I'm saying is if there's any web person hearing, you're doing an absolutely great job. Web, I think, is one of the most polished shows I've seen. To have many episodes, it's one of the most interesting shows I've seen. It has a really interesting creating direction, really interesting writing, really interesting story, really interesting everything. It's truly excellent. So, good job. That is one of my most positive reviews. Look, I mean, I don't like to say reviews, so I'm not going to say not a review. I'm not giving it a score. But that is one of the most positive discussions I've had of an Object Catchup show, probably ever. It's one of them. It's up there. Okay, no, I've talked about some stuff extremely positive, but this is one of them. This goes right up there among the top. So, absolutely good job for Web and BFDIE, I guess. So that was the start of the video. We're all caught up. See you next time.